I can't remember the last time that I left the house. I do know that I ran out of my medication a few days ago, but the apathy that I was feeling just kept telling me to stay in, lock the door, and go back to bed. Not like I could afford it anyway, with no insurance to speak of and barely $10 to my name. Heck, the last grocery delivery that I got is barely hanging on, despite my depressed appetite forcing me to ration it. I had about 12 different voicemails from my mom asking why I wasn't responding, begging to know that I was still alive, but I just couldn't. It wasn't worth it because she wouldn't believe me anyway. Hell, I'm surprised she hasn't flown over here yet to drag me out. I can hear her now. You know that you're better than this, Daniel. Get up. Yeah, great motivation there. It was the voice in my head telling me that I was worthless, that it would be better for me, for everyone, if I just took myself out of the pool. It's not like I contributed much, just a struggling writer who posts horror stories on the internet. Not like it was enough to keep the lights on. Then again, I don't know if anyone would notice if I stopped paying rent in this shithole high-rise, other than the slumlord that already bled me dry like a damned vampire. He didn't even come around anymore, and knew that eviction wasn't worth the trouble. The cops didn't care about things out here, and this guy was already on their shit list. Must not have paid his dues to the police union lately. Loud discordant tones rang from my phone, sitting on the charger beside my bed. I don't even know why I bothered to keep it charged other than doom scrolling anyway. Not like anything was looking up in the world recently. I figured it was just another silver alert, some old dementia patient taking the keys when they shouldn't. My grandpa made it all the way to Mexico like that one time. Unlike his decaying brain though, mine found the idea of being outside terrifying. Just the slightest hint of stepping out of my apartment was dread-inducing, with the insane amount of things that could go wrong at every moment. Hell, just going to the grocery store can get you shot these days. Why risk it? Not the point. Check your phone. The sleep in my eyes wasn't leaving, taking every chance when I tried blinking it away, desperate to put me back under its dreamy spell. My hand darted out, limbs heavy, still not awake, and pulled my phone to my face. It wasn't even dark out, despite the blackout curtains making it look like it was the dead of night. No, the phone read 2:37 p.m., with the alert notification in full right below it. Emergency nationwide alert. All persons. Do not, under any circumstance, look at the sky. Please close all windows, doors, and any other way to view the outside world. Please shelter in place until the alert has been lifted. If you are not in an area to shelter in place, please carefully move to the nearest building with adequate shelter. Repeat, do not look at the sky under any circumstances. If you or someone near you has made this mistake, immediately administer the following emergency procedures. 1. Restrain the exposed. Rigid, stronger bonds are recommended. 2. Do not attempt to reason with the subject. They will tell you that they're unaffected. 3. Terminate the subject through dismemberment or immolation. Use both to be safe. 4. Remain hidden until this alert is lifted. The hell's going on? I mumbled, still in my half-asleep state. I'm barely through the message when a call starts coming through from my mom. God, I don't want to speak to her, but with something like that coming through, I want to think that it was a prank. Some joker hacking the system for some kicks, like Max Headroom back in the day. I don't know though, so I better at least set Mom at ease. Guess it's the best time to let her know that I'm alive. Take a deep breath and answer the phone. I hit the button, with Mom's voice coming in almost immediately, frantic and screaming. I barely make out what she's saying.
Oh my God, are you okay? Are you safe? Don't do it. Don't look out, please.
She was tripping over words and sobs started coming between.
Your father. Oh God, your father.
Mom, what the hell is happening? The sleep is shaking out with my fear spiking instead. She never sounded like this. Mom is always the tough, no-nonsense type, more likely to curse at a problem and beat it into the ground instead of walking away. I barely ever heard the woman cry, much less utter the word God without it being in Sunday school reference. Where's Dad at? What did he do?
He was outside doing yard work. You know how your dad is. Next thing I know, he's bashing at the door trying to get in. He's changing. I swear that his eyes are gone. He's practically foaming at the mouth, but it's like all his teeth are they're growing or something. They keep getting longer in his mouth and sharper. I don't know what to do. What do I do? He's trying to say something, but I can't understand the words.
The words are coming out more forced now, sobs more pronounced, and her breathing was cut short in fear. Whatever apathy that I had about talking to her before was gone, now full of fear that this may be the last time that I speak to her. Mom, you need to hide. Go in the bathroom, there's no windows or anything. Grab a phone, a charger, a knife, whatever you can. Don't look out, do you understand? Jesus, is that me talking? I haven't had this kind of command in years, and not since I burnt out around my mid-20s. Adrenaline is one hell of a drug. Mom, I need you to confirm. Do you understand me?
Yes.
She stuttered.
Winston was out there with him. He's gone.
Oh shit, their dog. Stereotypical bulldog name aside, he was a good boy. Probably got spooked about what had happened with Dad. No, I can't talk to her about that right now. Got to keep the confidence going or she'll break down completely. We'll find him later, he probably ran off.
No, he's gone. Your father has him. He's making something with the body, like a statue or something.
She was muttering now. Mom, are you moving? Are you going to hide? I asked again, pressuring her to keep going. I need you to hide in the bathroom, the one connected to your room, okay? Lock every door on the way and keep yourself safe. Please, Mom. Glass shatters as she screams, a garbled sound coming from nearby. There's a brief thud as Mom drops the phone, making it hit the hard wooden floors of their house. I can hear Dad's raspy voice speaking with something unintelligible through a warped mouth.
He has me, please, talk to him, help.
Her sobs were punctuated by scrapes along the floor with periodic thumps, shattered glass tinkling and crunching on the ground.
No, Jeremy, please, I don't want to go out. Come and see.
A hiss was barely audible over her screams. Dad's voice. I could recognize it anywhere, even through these strange noises that he was making.
Worship with us. No, please stop. Don't make me look.
Mom's screaming pleas are cut short. Complete silence on the other line before she suddenly begins to whisper.
Praise be.
Mom, please, are you okay? I was screaming into the phone now, holding it to my face on speakerphone to try and get any attention possible. Instead, I only got silence, punctuated by the occasional scream in the distance. Nobody answered my cries. I finally hung up, knowing that nothing would come from staying on the line. My only thought was that at least I had peace of mind knowing that my parents are already gone. It's not some mystery that I'll never know the answer to, so at least there's that, I guess. Now I know it's not a prank either, something really messed up is going on. Okay, be logical. The alert said don't look at the sky. Dad was outside when it happened, so that confirms something there. Restraining them makes sense now, but destroying them? Good God, that's bad if the government is recommending it. Maybe there's something on the news. As soon as the thought crossed my mind, I found the remote, flipping it to the local news on my hijacked cable. The anchorman was sitting there, worry on his face, as voices from behind the camera clamored in nervous agony. I get it, I got to hear my parents die. How many of these people have loved ones that they have no idea about? How many were there out of some sense of duty, trying to keep anyone who watched safe? We have yet to know if anything can cure the result of what's happening. What we have heard from the CDC and World Health Organization is that this is not an isolated event. This is happening worldwide, with the same symptoms presenting regardless of nationality, race, sex. Nothing is discriminatory about this. If you look at the sky, you are dead, effective immediately. If someone you know looks at the sky, immediately seek safety and isolate them. Restrain them if possible. This has a 100% infection rate and will not pick and choose who receives its horror. We hope to have a representative from the CDC on soon to speak. He was stammering, barely keeping it together. The phone ringing nearly made him jump from his chair, the sweat on his brow drenching his perfectly groomed hair. Well, yes, that seems to be them now. Professor Sigurd. Yes, this is Professor Sigurd. Please, if you're listening, we beg you to not go outside. Don't look out your windows, don't do anything that could expose you to a clear view of the sky. Something is changing, people. He was frantic, terror in his voice, but also menace. He knew something that the rest of us didn't yet. Please, if somebody you know is exposed, isolate and restrain them. They will try to expose you as well in any way possible. Explains what my dad did, I guess. The professor kept going, though. The only thing that affected beings want to do is reinforce their numbers. They'll do it through any means, even working together. The only thing that we know is that they speak of worship for whatever they see. He continued on. I'm sorry, Professor, can I ask a question? The anchorman said, holding a hand up like he was commanding the caller to stop. What the hell is up there? Well, as of now, we still don't know. We're attempting to see how we can view it without causing an infection. It's a drawn-out process of trial and error. He replies, shaking in his voice. It's currently unknown, though we have tried to see it through cameras and other means, but nothing comes up. It's like filming a clear sky. So recordings of the phenomena will not cause infection. The anchorman tries to clarify, a look of relief spreading across the nervous lines drawn taut on his face. We have only tried digital recordings, but yes, the infection will not take hold when viewed through recorded video. That said, we have yet to commence live viewing, only trying pre-recorded as of now. Please use discernment and do not try anything that could expose yourself or others. Still rambling on, he sounded more panicked than before though. Something else was creeping in. I want to stress and I feel that I cannot do it enough to stay hidden from any of these things. They are no longer your loved ones. They are no longer the people you know, worked with, or grew up with. They are monsters, plain and simple. I turned it off. Not like I had planned to go outside anytime soon anyway. So no worries about looking at the sky for me. Now just to lock the doors and wait for things to blow over. Mom's screams keep bursting through my mind though, making me jump as if she were right next to me, shrieking for her life as Dad drags her away. It all felt so real that I just had to try. Picking up my phone and letting out a deep sigh, I called her number. Ringing. The steady and consistent dial tone sound as I waited for her was torture. I knew she wasn't going to pick up, so why the hell was I doing this? It's only going to go to voicemail, and then I have to hear her sounding happy. But the screen changed, video popping up as she answered a video call. The ceiling was visible only, their fan spinning lazily above, a spatter of red on one blade still dripping down steadily. I was holding my breath without realizing it, but whatever air was still in my lungs began hissing out slowly as I whispered, hoping against whatever terror was causing this. Mom? Mom, is that you?
Come and see.
A whisper barely audible over the phone speaker. Suddenly the screen is hectic, something picking up the phone and flailing around the room. Moments of chaos pass, finally settling on a face. What remains of a face at least. It was definitely Mom, or was at one time, but now the entire upper half of her face was gone. Like physically there was still the space, but the skin where her eyes and nose once were was gouged out, scraped raw to expose the bone and muscle in her skin underneath. Her eyes were totally gone, nose cut off at the base, yet I could still feel her staring at me.
Come and see.
She whispered again. No, this wasn't right. This wasn't my mother. This wasn't anything how she could be. There's no reason for any of this.
Come and see. Worship with us. The seal is broken.
I didn't even realize that I was practically smacking the shit out of my phone screen, shaking hands and doing my best to hit the dang cancel button for the call. The red button finally connected, the disconnect tone hitting right as Mom began to turn the phone screen away from herself. The open door flashing before me as it began to reveal the open sky. My eyes clenched shut as I tossed the phone away, praying for it to end. Why did I try that? I should have known. I should have known that it was going to end badly. Jesus, what's happening out there? I got my answer almost immediately. A loud explosion shaking the building, causing windows to rattle. Whatever it exploded, it was close. Screams coming from outside that could be heard even up here on the 15th floor. Another loud boom shook me again, this time feeling even closer. Close enough that the window in my bedroom shattered, bringing the noise outside in, screams echoing from below. Good God, what is going on out there? I could hear nothing but screams and chaos coming from below. The Atlanta streets in a frenzy, violence ringing through the air. People begging for their lives, pleading for their loved ones, all punctuated by that same phrase, come and see. As much as I don't want to, there might be something useful on TV, if it's still active. The screen came on, same channel as before, but the anchorman was now replaced by a woman. A small crying at the bottom of the screen reading out a new message. Martial law. All emergency services are suspended. That was fast. It had only been, 15 minutes? Honestly, time is a foreign concept right now. I threw my phone somewhere under the couch while I was trying to get away from Mom, so no telling what it was. The television didn't have the time either, just more warnings coming across the screen. Those same instructions to dismember or kill anyone affected by the thing in the sky. We're going to go live to Devin outside. The new woman on TV was stammering out, looking around nervously like she had no idea what to do. He's volunteered. Yeah, that's it. He's volunteered to go outside and film the sky for us live to see what's up there. 1 second, we'll switch to his feed. The screen cut out to the anchorman from before, now screaming and red-faced as others were dragging him somewhere. He was fighting back, but it was basically useless against the number of people around him. Whoever was recording was following right alongside, saying nothing while some messed up film was about to go down. The pale fluorescence around them made the beige hallway seem like the most mundane corridor to hell that there could be. Finally, they had reached a heavy metal door with the group setting Devin down and pushing his back against it. The camera was shoved into his hands, changing POV to show the scared man who was previously recording. Before Devin could beg for mercy, they pushed him backward through the door, the camera falling with a thud next to him on the ground. They slammed the door shut as Devin's sobbing and bleeding face is captured for the world to see, still lying on the concrete. Please, I just want to go to my family, please. He was choking out between pained sobs. Liza, please be safe. I'll be there soon. I didn't realize until the screen began to blur, but I was crying now. Jesus, I felt empty for so long that I almost forgot what it was like. Between seeing my own family and hearing what's on the streets, can't say that I didn't feel for the guy. Hell on earth, but he probably has no idea where his family is. I was almost rooting for him like I was watching some underdog at the Olympics when he left the camera behind, keeping his head down and running fast. There is a small car parallel parked right down the street. I'm guessing that it's his because he dug keys from his pocket before jumping in. Car starting with a jump before it was swarmed on all sides. People. No, the blood all over their faces said otherwise. Monsters. That idiot. A woman's voice cut in, feed switching back over to the studio news desk. The woman was beating her fist on the table, anger overflowing in her voice. Oh, sorry folks, technical difficulties. We'll be right back. The screen flashed out instead, taking over by the emergency alert system, same as before. The people down at the station must have lost the battle with their own sanity, turning on each other, not surprising. It took me a few minutes of searching and grasping blindly under the couch, but I finally found my phone again. There was a missed call from Mom. I'm assuming just to try again for her original goal, but I know what she is now. I'm not risking that. Let's see if there is anything else out there though. Twitter was a cesspool as usual, with plenty of conspiracies floating around. Reddit wasn't too much better. Some claiming that it was the end of the world while others said it was some Russian attack. Meanwhile, everything around the world was going through the same nightmare. People turning into monsters outside our doors, but we're arguing on the internet about who's behind it. Nobody even knew what the heck it was. All of this complaining, all of this blame being thrown around, and nobody can even know because just looking up is enough to turn you into one of those things. The worst part is that it doesn't show up in photographs or videos. Not digital anyway. There was talk of trying analog recording methods, a lot of discussion about how digital can't capture it because of cybernetic cloaking or some shit like that. There's no telling what's truth and what's not at this point. The analog idea got me thinking though. God, where is that thing? I ran to the closet to throw open boxes still packed from moving over 2 years ago, desperately searching. Finally I found it, my old Polaroid that Dad got me for Christmas one year. This thing was vintage and he found it in great condition. I double checked it was good to go, grabbing a pack of photos for it and loading them in. Camera open, the daylight seeping in from cracks under the window. I tested it out. The shutter gave a mechanical hiss, bulb flashing bright against the relatively dark room, and a small picture zipped right out of the camera's front. Alright, take it out, flap it around for a second, and good. My tiny studio apartment was all there, caught on grainy film against the backdrop. In a world that wasn't ending, this would be the cover of a Midwest emo album. Alright, step up. Don't look up, just put the camera through the window and press the shutter. Don't even think about it. But thinking about it was the only thing I could do. Okay, start slow instead. 2 hands, nervously reaching from this side of the curtains while turning my head as far as I could, trying to hold the bulky camera steady enough to snap the picture. I didn't even know if it would get a picture. Angle it toward the ground now, okay, and click. I could hear the bulb hiss, that same shutter sound before I yanked it back in, looking with fear at the undeveloped photo jutting out from the slot. Pick it up and give it a wave. Color began to fade in slowly, revealing the lush greens and browns of trees below in the Atlanta fall. Around the street, though, was a bloodbath straight from a horror movie. These things were just grabbing people, horror on their faces as they were dragged from homes and businesses, all being forced to open their eyes, looking up at the bright, cloudless sky above. Even in the grainy photo, I could still catch the fear in those people's eyes, some seeing their final moments against their will. Others were right in the midst of their own agony, gouging their eyes out with fingers, scratching any semblance of sight from their face with whatever they could find. I dropped the photo upon noticing a child with what looked like a shard of broken mirror from a nearby car, readying it in front of his left eye for something that I knew wasn't going to be good. Hell, I don't want to do this. I don't even want to try seeing what's in the sky. What if I can do something good though? Maybe contribute something good. Solve a part of this big, messed up mystery of a situation. I can try, right? Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Stick the camera through the curtains again and keep it steady. There weren't any taller buildings than mine nearby. The the city is starting to level out into suburbs just outside of my window. This is it. A clear shot of the sky beyond, but will it work? Will it turn me into one of them? I mean, hell, I'm probably dead at this point. Still too scared to leave my apartment at the end of the world. Still worried about eviction or paying bills like there's even going to be a tomorrow. My finger clicks the shutter, that same bulb flash and hiss as it imprinted outside onto the film. Deep and steady, careful not to bump the photo as I bring it back in, making sure to keep looking away from the crack in the curtains, the world outside going straight to hell. I got it. I got the photo. Now just to give it a little exposure so that it develops. Jesus Christ. I see it. Clear as day, I see it. It's showing up on the Polaroid, this giant. It looked like a man up top, riding a horse like he was heading into battle. The horse was beyond dead though, skin and nerves flayed, exposing the dark red bloody muscle underneath. It was in motion as it was captured on the grimy photo, legs mid-pump, propelling itself toward Earth. No telling how big the damn thing was, but it was larger than the sun in the sky, threatening to blot it out at any moment as it cast a shadow over the world beyond. The rider was even more terrifying than the skinless horse, a charred, barely hanging on body with missing limbs. The foot was barely attached, jostling alongside the horse. Meanwhile, the face had its eyes gouged out, much like those below, but it looked like his wounds were cauterized, terrible burns marking the top of his visage as his jaw hung open, one side dangling down further in a lopsided grin. I wanted to throw up, wanted to scream and open the window wide to show myself that it wasn't real. I could hear something nagging at the back of my mind the entire time, a guttural, whispered voice struggling to speak through a destroyed throat. Come and see. Everything else in my head was screaming, telling me not to listen to that thing. It sounds so welcoming though, to look to the sky and let all my worries go to see the giant figure on the red horse. No, I can't let go now. I actually did something. I got some kind of answer right. I did something good. Who am I even asking at this point other than the voices in my head? At least some are telling me to live. It's better than most days. A scream pierced the air from outside, waking me out of the trance that I had been in. Hand reached out to the curtain in front of me to pull it back. No, can't do that. I pulled my hand back fast, like touching a still hot pan on the stove, dropping the Polaroid in the process. From lower down, the scream quickly died out, joining the now steady whispers growing loud enough to hear even this high up, all beginning to sink in their strange beckoning. Come and see. They must have gone through most of these street-level buildings already, which means they'll probably move up here soon. I can at least get the picture on the internet. Maybe someone can do something with it. A tweet, a Reddit post, anything. Hell, I'll put it up on TikTok if it gets the attention that could help someone. It only took moments after I had snapped a picture of the Polaroid to post it, and not long after that for comments to start flooding in. Hey, stop spreading disinformation. Cool picture, who drew it? Nice Photoshop, jackass, but the world is ending. I told you all to repent. Standard run-of-the-mill BS, of course, nobody would believe it. Why believe the insanity happening right outside your window when you can make up stuff on the internet? Jesus Christ, I might jump off the roof before I even get a chance to look at the thing. The flood of notifications started to make me just want to end it all, knowing that there wasn't going to be any help for anyone in this shitstorm of death. And when he opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." Oh, you've got to be kidding me. As many Sunday school lessons and church sermons that I've been dragged to in my life, all the Southern evangelical hellfire that I've heard, there's no way. It fit though. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, except this is the second one. Jesus, what was the first? The pale horse, I think. No idea where he is, but the second was the red horse. The one that was always brought up in sermons about the end times. Endless war and bloodshed to really bring everything together. We really, truly are screwed, I guess. A crash from below takes me out of my focus, remembering millions of Bible verses that I had to study back in school despite how bored I was. Hell, Revelations was one of the few that held my attention for longer than a second. The whole thing was like a metal album on the most hardcore hallucinogens possible. Seeing it firsthand is much more terrifying. It's the end of the world outside. A bloody horse and an undead rider are hurtling through the sky and I feel whelmed. Maybe it's just the lack of meds in my brain deciding that it's not the worst thing that could happen. But the end of the world feels like a damned relief. Or at least it did until the noises started going downstairs. Crashes at first, mixed in with some of the few sporadic screams left in the streets. And then it started getting even closer though, working from the street through the thin walls of my building. Screams below my feet outside my door. They were finally coming after us. My phone let out a loud siren again, another alert coming through during the chaos. I looked down seeing if there was any message for safety, shelter, an answer to any of this. Come and see. That was it. The emergency alert was just the same thing. Everything's over. I don't know what to do. I'm safe in here, I think. I don't want to risk opening my door because they might come in here. No, stay here, stay in safety, don't look outside. Come and see. A voice, but not from the streets below me or even outside my door. It sounded clear enough to be right in my ear, standing right beside me, pushing me to go look. Why not, right? I had already seen the picture, not like looking at the actual thing could break me much at this point, right? No, I have to figure a way out. Don't think about looking at the dang thing. Just get out and try to find shelter elsewhere. The basement. There's a basement level that has sewer access, I think. Can't see the sky if I'm underground. Can't get exposed by those things if there's nothing to make me look at it. It's perfect. There's no rhyme or reason to it. My BPD brain just suddenly said, "You can get out of here." And next thing I know, I'm just rolling with it. The energy is here, so I'm not letting go. I don't want to die as much as I'm okay with the world ending. A knife, a flashlight that barely works. Wasn't much to choose from in my empty apartment. I have to give myself some credit. At least I wasn't a hoarder. It took all of 5 minutes to get ready and then 1 minute for all my hopes to get to the basement to fly right out the window. Noises grew louder, the screams advancing up the building along with something new. The smell of smoke. Oh shit, is all that I can whisper shout to myself as things get worse. I brace myself standing in front of the apartment door, eyes closed tight, praying to whatever God would send this hell to us that they weren't going to be right outside just yet. Reach for the knob, get ready to turn, fling, and run. Jesus, the knob was hot and the fire was already close outside. There might not be any way down, they're probably trying to flush us out. I grabbed a towel off the bathroom sink, wrapping it around the knob this time and pushing it open. Flames were already lighting up the dingy hallway, lights flickering out as fire tore through the electrical system. Whatever fire safety system that they had in the building wasn't doing anything. An alarm ringing without any sort of sprinkler even attempting to help. Smoke was rising high, covering the ceiling before the flames could take it first. Only time was keeping it from burning. Alright, change of plans, run the other way. The stairs are on the other end of the hallway with only hopes guiding me to see if they would still get me down to ground level. Bursting through the emergency door was like hitting a wall of heat. Fire already rising up from the ground floor under the winding stairs below. No way down, only up. Screams echo behind me from the hallway. Creatures running through to pull out flaming bodies, tossing them from windows to see the sky outside. There's nothing that could get me back there. These damned things are already swarming this floor in droves to take more for their own. No, this was it. Face them or burn below. Neither are any kind of fun way out. Hell, both are going to be painful, and I would rather not do any form of pain. Come and see, come and see. One of the things was practically chanting with glee back in the hallway. Maybe it was better if I took myself out, not give them the chance to get a new recruit. The knife in my hand could probably get right through my neck easily. Maybe if I went through the ear, it would keep me down. My only worry is that they'll get to me before I can actually die. No, the knife wouldn't work worth a damn. The only other option is up there. The stairs above me were clear of any flames, just smoke rising slowly to build up above. There was a roof access door up there. Usually it's where the teenagers would go to smoke without getting caught, but it would make a good place for a final bow. 26 floors and I'm on 15. I better start running. Except before I can get moving, one of them sees me. It screams, running for me in a frenzy while still repeating the same verse fragment. Come and see, come and see. It was in my head at this point too, screaming on the outside and the inside. There's no escaping it. As soon as it began after me, more joined, running from rooms in the opposite end of the hall, pouring toward me in a chorus of the damned. Down below, more ran up the stairs, flame covering their bodies like living funeral pyres, all coming to attend my wake. No time to hesitate now, I guess. The stairs were taken two at a time for the next 5 floors at least, but that was about when I started feeling how out of shape I was. The adrenaline was going wild, but my lungs were burning. Floors above were no better than mine, with creatures already starting to flush through from the roof down. I wouldn't be surprised if there were people up there when everything went to shit, considering it was easier than smoking on the street for most people. Rising flames kept anyone from escaping though, leaving them to either jump to their deaths or be forced to look outside by the demons. The air was getting thin up here as the smoke continued rising, making me cough through labored breathing. Floor 22 now, screams echoing behind me as the same creature that saw me initially kept following. Maybe it's some sort of hive mind that they have, because this thing was forming a whole group to run after me, just a couple of flights of stairs behind. Some of them were on fire, spreading the blaze around to others as they packed in tight on the narrow steps. They didn't stop though, all frothing past each other to get at me. Keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing. Gritting my teeth and taking the deepest breath that I could finally do, it got me to the roof access. A huge red door with an emergency light blaring above it, loud buzzing from the fire alarm letting everybody know that the world was screwed. The damn thing was already swinging open and closed hard, wind outside fighting with hot, flaming air inside to see who would win. Come and see, worship with us for the time is near. So many voices down below on the stairs, all screaming out in the same terrifying rumble, eyeless faces smiling up at me in bliss. They weren't afraid, weren't driven by any kind of hunger or goal. They were just happy. It's these same looks that I would see in the adults during church services, those same smiles of being assured in their place in the world, even after they had stepped out of that building and acted like a whole different person than they claimed. That same fake smile stayed though, making the damaged half of their face look even more terrifying in contrast. The chorus of hell continued as I ran out of time to open the door. They were almost upon me when I finally got up the nerve, walking close and closing my eyes before stepping out. I can visualize the entire roof in my mind after being up here so much. Straight ahead is the AC unit for the building. To my right is another, shorter building that could interrupt my fall. My left was the best destination. Over the side, right down onto the paved street below, still probably teeming with these terrors. I don't have a choice. The voices grew louder behind me, screaming, "Come and see!" So loud that it began to make my ear buzz with static, deafening its power. Run, run, keep running. It's all that I can do to keep moving, but I eventually hit the edge, barely stopping myself from falling right over. Stop for a moment and make sure you do this right. Climb up, take a stand, don't face the road though. No, if I see what's below, it's going to make me stop. Don't stop, I can't stop. I have to end this myself before they can end me. With my feet on the concrete edge, the wind beginning to hit me hard, almost knocking me off balance and into the pavement below. I open my eyes to see the creatures pouring out of the access door running behind me. I step back, falling backward to face the sky above, losing any stability and giving myself to gravity. Come and see. The voices rang out again. The sun was bright, but in the moment I fell back to the ground with nothing but the high sky above me. Their words echoed louder, and I saw, finally I saw, while a loud and thunderous chorus all combined into one singular voice, ringing out once more. Come and see. I beheld a red horse galloping through the sky with immense speed. War sat upon him, a massive sword held in frail, decaying hands, slicing the air as more and more on earth cut each other down, brother killing brother. My last sight before gravity turned me on my head was the horse, his eyes burning bright with the heat of the sun, pure hatred burning in its face. As my body turned, seeing the creature began to make me feel at peace. This was our fate, but was it a bad fate? The Messiah will be here soon, and the horseman is just bringing his good news. War will be a blight on the earth no more, with no humans left to foster aggression toward one another. Now we would all come together in worship, spreading the good news of what's to come by opening the eyes of others. My eyes are open now, though these eyes cannot yet comprehend the beauty of what I've seen. No, I'll need to open up my real eyes, the ones underneath these, and then I'll be able to see the true beauty of what's to come, the true salvation all this bloodshed will bring, the coming of a new kingdom built on the bodies of the damned. The last fading thought that I have is the same phrase that brought me terror just moments before. My lips part, pushing words out in a whisper against wind trying to rip them through my throat. 3 final words before the pavement meets my head. The old me's plan working perfectly as I hit skull first, spilling my brain over the concrete. My lips still manage to finish the final word though, twitching as the rest of my body falls to the ground. Come and see. Today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. Now I'm sure that we've all been there. You sign up for something, forget about it after the trial ends, and then of course, you get billed. You forget to delete the subscription. It's still there, but you're not using it. In fact, you're not alone. About 85% of people have at least one paid subscription that goes unused every month. But thanks to Rocket Money, I can see all my subscriptions in one place and cancel the ones that I'm not using anymore, saving me time and money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps today. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Creeps. Calling the little place that I lived in a sleepy small town seems ironic right about now. It's not like any of us were going to sleep anytime soon, or ever again maybe. I've been awake for 72 hours now, so give me a little grace when it comes to keeping my story straight. The past few days in Hazelwood have been chaotic for everyone. and we're all running on fumes. The last morning, everything was normal with Saturday. I ran out to Wally's grocery to get a few things to throw on the grill that night. Figured that I would have a couple of friends over, a few drinks, set up the fire pit now that the weather was getting more crisp. Have a nice night. I barely got through the door when the truck started going through the streets. A pre-recorded message playing asking everybody to return to their homes for their own safety. An alert came through on my phone within seconds, echoing the sentiments. Emergency alert. Please stay indoors. Intense weather events imminent in your area. For your own safety, please remain inside with windows and doors closed. Weird, but okay. Maybe there was a storm system coming through, but why wouldn't it say that there would be a tornado watch or something? Everyone else was just as confused, milling back to their cars to head back home. I did the same, hopping in my crappy old hatchback and getting back home within minutes. After going inside, I sat up near the window for a few minutes, curious to see what might be going on. Well, the alert wasn't wrong. Clouds rolled in quick, massive, dark, and swirling ones. I could see purple lightning even discharging in some, with the occasional flash of green coming through. The rain that came with it brought a smell that I could pick up even from inside the house. Metallic, though with a hint of acidity that almost stung my nostrils. There was nobody out on the streets, not even animals running around. All in all, it came down pretty hard, but it only lasted maybe 20 minutes at most. The second alert followed not long after everything had stopped, this one making me a lot more nervous than the first. Emergency alert. Please remain indoors. Stay awake, do not fall asleep or allow any friends and loved ones to do the same. Please stay tuned for further updates. This one had me. I honestly thought that it was a hoax for a minute, like that time that somebody sent a fake nuke warning to everyone in Hawaii. The more I looked around outside though, the more I wondered. Everything was too still, especially for a Saturday morning. Not even the birds were chirping. Hell, even the crickets and frogs that normally would be throwing a rave after every shower didn't have anything to say. Just eerie quiet, not even a breeze to rustle the leaves. An ambulance cut the silence, tearing down the main street just a few dozen feet away, going further into town. They didn't usually go that fast down this part of the road, considering all the residential homes out here that they had to blow by. I walked out on my front porch, looking around to see what the hell might be going on. Strange weather, ain't it? A gruff voice shouted over to me. Across the road and to the left, old Mr. Hutch was sitting on his porch, rocking in that same old chair that he spent hours in. Yeah, weird stuff. Those alerts seem real to you? I asked. He looked at me, not understanding, so I held up my phone to him. The emergency alerts that came through, did you get them? Oh, I ain't got one of those damn things, and just the landline. I don't need all that Facebook and Twitter bullshit, he said, starting to go off louder. There's something happening in town. Not sure, to be honest. I just got an alert that said stay inside and don't fall asleep. Might not want to stay on that rocker too long just in case, I said. He only laughed. Son, I've taken Saturday naps at noon since I was a boy. Didn't even miss them when I was riding choppers in Vietnam. The cell phones ain't gonna stop that. He chuckled out. I couldn't help but laugh along with him. Man had his priorities after all. Not like I could argue him out of taking a nap on his porch. Well, enjoy it. I'll catch you later. Tell Mrs. Hutch I still want her Swedish meatball recipe when she gets a chance. We both gave parting waves and I stepped back inside, moving into my home office just down the hallway from the front door. Cracking the blinds here, I had a full view of the neighborhood, including Hutch now beginning to nod off on his porch. While I booted up my computer and started getting a little bit of work done, I just figured I would keep an eye on things. I don't know how much time had passed. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour at most. But I started noticing him kind of jerking around in the seat. I mean, the guy was in his late 70s, so I got a little nervous and I started to head outside, seeing what if he needed help or was just having a bad dream. I barely made it off my porch when his head quite literally ejected from his body. I don't know how else to describe it. It fired right off his shoulders like a damn firework on Independence Day. As soon as it did though, something else just sprouted right from the bloody stump, taking up residence where his head was before. It looked like this centipede thing. Tons of spindly legs coming out of the sides with one huge hexic eye right in the center. It bent and swayed on the shoulders as it extended from his body, getting used to it before making it stand, walking into his house next. For a minute I was split on what to do. Either run back into my place and barricade the door or run in and try to save Mrs. Hodge, assuming that she was in there. Not that I had to assume long, as a scream cut the air just seconds later. No time to think, I ran full burst up the porch steps and through the front door, emerging on a terrifying scene. Hutch's body was pressing down on his wife, the massive centipede bursting from his stump neck and striking at her. It had already gotten her a couple of times, dozens of sharp tendrils extending from the mouth of the thing that had nicked at her skin. Apparently that's all it took. Something secreted in those pincers was winning the battle over Mrs. Hodge, making her quickly lose consciousness and fall to the floor. As she fell asleep, the Hutch centipede thing got up, turning attention to me now as it walked forward. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, no, leave me alone, Hutch, I swear to God," I said, scrambling to find anything that could function as a weapon. There was a bag of golf clubs right by the door. Not sure what I was about to get from it, but gripping one of the handles, I pulled it up, emerging with the driver. Good enough. No hesitation. This thing didn't have a damn head and it didn't have any rights other than what it was about to get. I swung the club hard, catching the centipede thing right on the tip, making it hiss as it reeled back. Mrs. Hutch began writhing on the floor, screams coming through in guttural barks as something tore at her throat from the inside. Her head didn't fly off nearly as violently as his did, but it stretched and tore instead, pain and fear in her eyes the whole time. It looked like even while she was feeling this, she was just going through a nightmare in her sleep, seeing death play out on an infinite scale in her mind. The centipede that emerged her was smaller than the other, and it didn't seem to have control over the body quite yet, maybe because it had appeared too early. Either way, Hutch was still bearing down on me, and so I swung again, this time retreating for the door, desperately to get to safety. Backing through the door nearly caused me to trip over the threshold, swinging once more at the terrifying bug as it lashed out at me. This time it caught my swing, twisting around the club in order to take it away from me, as arms raised to grab onto whatever of me it could reach. Stumbling had probably saved my life and giving me a slight distance to turn and start running down the steps, back over to my house. The clouds were still obscuring the sky above, fresh flashes of lightning beginning to go off above. Something was in the air, different than after any other storm, and the sound of screams began to reach me faintly over the still air. I wasn't the only one contending with what was going on, apparently. The door slammed behind me as I dove through, quickly deadbolting and locking it before drawing my blinds closed. It only took seconds for them to start banging on the door then, massive thuds landing on the solid wood. Way more power behind the hits than old Hutch ever had in him in his prime. At this point, I'm not going to mess around with whatever is happening. There was an old shotgun up in the attic in a case, left to me by Gramps when he had died a few years ago. The thing should still work, and if I remembered right, there was some ammo on hand in the same case that it came with. I don't think that I would have ever taken it out of the case otherwise. Thankfully, I could still remember all the shooting lessons that he gave me when I was a kid. A gun nut as he was, and it all began to come back. It wasn't much, just a pump action. 7 shells left in the ammo box that was in the case. It would be enough. I racked it, making sure there wasn't already a shell in the chamber before beginning to load them in. The banging was still going on at the door downstairs, but only one of them remained from the sound of it. It was cold up here in the attic. Stale air and insulation the only thing other than old boxes to keep me company. For a few minutes, I checked out, I think taking in the weight of everything happening today. Hell, I needed a moment just to prepare myself. Centipede head or not, this was still my neighbor for the last 4 years. He and his wife had invited me into their home plenty of times, fed me some great dinners, and now it was like some messed up Resident Evil game I was getting to live through. A skittering from the other side of the attic wall brought me back to the present. The thin wood and insulation was being pressed inward, something tapping along as it tried to find a way in from the other side. Probably the worst noise that I've ever heard too, like dozens of roaches just skittering across a wooden board. My skin was crawling. Hoisting the shotgun to my shoulder and aiming as the taps moved closer to the small vent in the wall leading to outside. I could see the shadow over the slats before legs began poking through them, working to stretch what it could and fit through, desperate to get to me. I kept working at the slats for a moment before one finally gave in, weathered from years. This house was old, so not too much of a surprise. But as soon as it gave, that was the reinforcement that the crawler needed, forcing its way further in and extending further through the vent, catching sight of me right as I pulled the trigger. It burst, guts and pieces of the shell flying everywhere while legs rained down. The remainder of it slumped over, dangling in the window as I made my way back through the attic door, still focusing my gun right on the damn thing. I got downstairs and I heard Mrs. Hutch still beating on the door, fistfalls getting louder as she seemingly gained more power behind the blows. I hesitated only momentarily, unlocking the deadbolt and stepping off to the side into the hallway, behind the door as it opened. Gun trained right at where eye level would be, or at least where I hoped it would be when she eventually entered the house. I almost shit my pants when this thing curled right around the doorway and stared into my soul before I got it together and I pulled the trigger. It burst, spattering guts all over me and making my ears ring at close range. Her body fell forward into the doorway, remains of the centipede skittering on the wooden floor as it went through death convulsions. I stepped out, partially to see if anyone else came out on hearing the noise and partially to see what had happened to Hutch's body. The answer was slumped on the lawn right by the wall, centipede extended all the way up and through the attic vent. His body wasn't even able to fall completely, with the centipede holding it up, likely at the limit that it could stretch. Legs ran the entire length of it, making me shiver just by looking. And grabbing Mrs. Hutch's ankles, I pulled her back out onto the lawn, getting her out of the way so that I could close the door and relock it. Without the worry of what the hell it might do to me, I was able to look closer at it now, seeing that the centipede I had thought it was actually something much worse. Every segment of the thing was part of her spine, vertebrae growing over each other as it extended out of her stump neck. The end of it where the shotgun had blasted off looked like a frayed electrical wire, dozens of smaller strands of spinal cord unraveling in at the top. I shivered, unsure of what the hell was going on, but knowing that it wasn't something I wanted any part of. The door slammed behind me. This time, though, I took a few other safety measures, pushing the recliner from the living room against the door frame to block it. I tried calling EMS to see if there was anyone that would even pick up, but sirens were blaring through the still air, mixing with far-off screams as more of the town began to contend with what was happening. The line was dead, much like I had expected, and all I could do was sigh, turning on the television and knowing that our dinky little town would never get the attention of the news. Sure enough, just more crap. A CEO arrested for money laundering, a reality star who was fighting back against the plastic surgery rumors, another war on the horizon. God, I was tired. I remember pacing my house until the sun went down, just hoping that I could hear something about what was happening in the world outside. Meanwhile, the cloud cover was still there, jolts of electricity lighting up the skyline every so often. The sirens eventually faded, but the screams didn't, only changing position as more of the town found the same thing that I did, just without as much luck surviving. Good news was that I had a decent amount of food. My grocery trip this morning was for a pretty spontaneous get-together. Not that I had heard from anyone since that first alert had popped up. If my friends were still out there, I hoped that they were still human at least. If not, who knows, maybe they made it out before things got bad. For once, I was kind of thankful for my bad sleep schedule. Insomnia was something that I've struggled with on and off my entire life, going whole nights without sleep at some points and just segueing into the next day. Not sleeping wasn't too much of a challenge for me, for a while anyway. Eventually, I just drew the blinds and tried to find something to do to keep my mind occupied, hoping that some alert would come through, telling me that everything was okay now and it was just some, I don't know. Nothing about this would fit into any natural explanation. Who knows, maybe it's still all a dream and I'm just asleep in bed, unaware that my alarm's gone off at this point. Wishful thinking, of course. Around 2 in the morning, someone set one of the houses down the street on fire. Despite the rainy conditions that had persisted since the first warning, the entire neighborhood quickly began to catch with no firefighters coming to get it under control. I was nearly dozing off in my living room, television on loud to hopefully keep me awake with the noise. I figured with where it was relative to the street outside, the sound wouldn't reach too terribly far, giving me some safety. I only realized the fire was going when I started to smell the smoke. Looking out my front window, it revealed that it had already jumped pretty far, only about 2 houses away from me. I was going to need to get the hell out of here or face the flames. I took everything that I could, a shotgun, a little cooler of food that I threw together that could easily be eaten without prep, some medical supplies from the bathroom. I loaded it all up in my car and I hit the road. It only took me about 5 minutes of driving to reach the edge of town and realize that things were far, far more messed up than I had originally believed. Cue my surprise when I'm driving along the highway, going slower than normal, thankfully, because I wanted to be vigilant, and I run my car smack into a solid wall. I can't believe how fortunate I was to get out relatively unscathed, only a nasty bruise on my shoulder. In getting out of the car, though, I thought that I had hit my head and gone to hell, because things just stopped making sense. The sky above was still sparking with electricity, blanketed by dark clouds against the night. It obscured the top of whatever wall was blocking my way, though I don't know if it was so much of a wall as more of a boundary. Not going to lie, I was feeling very Truman Show-esque. Or maybe Looney Tunes, considering how much of a weird fever dream this all was. The barrier had the road and landscape around town perfectly laid over it, not painted, I don't think, but kind of like a television. The clouds crackled with lightning in the distance, despite the distance not actually being there. Maybe it was all just a really thick window. I honestly couldn't tell with the darkness in my aching body. Whatever the hell it was, there was no way for me to get through. No staircase with a door and no hatch leading through. Not even a painted tunnel. My car in the meantime was, well, not doing great. The front end was accordion to hell, folding all over itself. It's a miracle that I was still alive. But honestly, the miracle made it feel more like I was trapped in this hell, damned to never escape. Well, I guess it's time to find another plan. To say things had played out weird since then is an understatement. You know, when you're in a nightmare, everything that happens is the most illogical shitstorm of a sequence. Like sometimes you'll just arrive at your next destination, something will appear out of nowhere. Nothing is off limits and anything could happen without the slightest hint of justification. That's how reality is moving right now. Genuinely, I don't even know where the hell I am right now. I'm holding up at a Wally's all the way on the other side of the town. My car is nowhere to be found, the shotgun is gone, and I'm sitting in the cheese aisle, pile driving through a deli tray like it's the last meal that I've ever had. It was like I was sleepwalking the entire time from when I noticed the barrier to now, sitting here stuffing my face. I nearly choked because of how taken aback I was. It reminded me of smoking some bad stuff back in my college days and finishing off a fifth of cheap vodka, total blackout. My watch said that it was around 2 in the afternoon on Monday now, hours lost and no idea where. Suddenly someone came around the corner into my aisle, making me stand and get ready to run. Whoa, you alright? A voice asked me, female, probably around my age. Seemed familiar. Perry, you okay over there? When did I get here? I asked, realizing that my voice was shaky now. She hurried over, putting a hand on my shoulder. I recognize her now. Sarah, one of the cashier girls that works here during the weekends. About 5 hours ago. You've been pretty out of it though, saying stuff about a wall. Looks like you took a pretty nasty bump, she said. I was starting to notice my surroundings more at the dim grocery store lit by every other halogen bulb in the place. Dark overcast lights outside with the occasional lightning. Shit, it wasn't a dream. There's more of those things out there, yeah? I said, looking toward the nearest exit now. The deli windows were boarded up tight against the outside, while the front doors were barricaded by all the shopping carts that could be brought in. God, I can't remember anything. Hey, it's okay, Perry, it's all good. Come on over and talk to the others. We're trying to see if we can put anything together, she said, beckoning me back toward the stockroom. There were 4 others in there right now, all gathered in a little fort of pallets and supplies. One of them had set up with a knife, sharpening mop handles to use for defense. 2 guys, 2 girls, with Sarah and I joining to bring it to an even split between the 6 of us. You're looking rough, man, said one of the guys, the one not sharpening broom handles. I recognized him from somewhere, but the face just didn't quite reconcile with anyone that I could think of. You run into the spines. The centipede things, yeah, I said, nodding. The others all murmured in agreement. Apparently, we had all seen it at this point, surviving to get this far. I'm sorry, I just can't remember how I got here. Nothing makes sense. Yeah, it's starting to get that way for all of us. One of the girls, a blonde covered in tattoos, said, I was sitting safe in the truck stop off 90 just a few minutes ago and now I'm here. Not a clue how. You've been here for a few hours though. Sarah mentioned, looking at her. The other woman, a smaller brunette with glasses that made her look like the binoculars from Toy Story, nodded in agreement. Sarah looked to the steak guy next. What about you? Stock it up in case of vampires. He just kept on carving, sharpening one end of a mop handle that was already finished with a wicked point. Even then, he continued, his only words, I had a baby. That was enough for the rest of us to infer what must have happened. Not many humans spend most of their time sleeping, but a baby, Jesus, poor guy. And we left him to his steak sharpening after that. Have any other alerts come through? I asked, looking around at the others. I feel like there's something that I might have missed somewhere, some crucial event, but everything was a blur. Nothing about how I got here made sense, with everyone else sharing similar feelings. At this point, even if we could get out of town, would it be too late for us? Just the same stuff. Don't fall asleep. Stay awake no matter what. Isolate any who may fall asleep. Bullshit like that. The other man said. I still couldn't place where I knew him from, with big bushy eyebrows that met in the middle and a thick comb over on top of his head. I was visiting my grandpa at the senior center when things started going crazy. Old people napping everywhere. Heads just started popping off like champagne corks. Yeah, what the hell is going on with those? I asked, still trying to gather my bearings. I thought they were like bugs. I have a theory that something happens when we enter REM sleep. Binoculars mentioned. It awakens whatever makes the spine take over. So that's just their spine? Tattoo asked now, panic in her eyes. I swear the one that I saw still had eyes on the end of it, looking at me the entire time it came after, and then those freaky threads that were coming out of it. Don't let those touch you, I mentioned, recounting the story of the Hutch family. They all shuddered except for Steak, who just kept staring blankly at the sharp point that he was making. He stopped carving after a moment, staring at the nasty tip on the javelin that he had made. Hey man, you okay? Be careful with that. I'm sorry, Millie, he said, standing up and situating the point of the carved handle on his neck, tilting it a little ways inward. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing that you're about to see something awful yet you're too terrified to move in time. He situated both hands on the handle, pushing the point into his neck so hard that a little bit of blood began to ooze out, and he threw himself forward toward the ground. The other end of the handle didn't have a mop head on it, just metal and rubber for holding it in place. It hit the ground, catching on a crack in the concrete that stopped it suddenly, holding it upward at an angle. The force of him falling forward made the point immediately puncture right through the underside of his head, managing to poke far enough through to come out the other side of his skull. God, why? Why did he do that? Sarah was backing away from the body, screaming now, while I and the other strange man just jumped back and stopped, unsure of how to process what was going on. Binoculars and Tattoo were holding each other, both in tears. He's dead. Steak let out a half gurgle, almost a comical noise as if he was reassuring us that he was still somehow kicking. His feet staggered forward a couple of steps, quickly beginning to slip in the blood pooling around him. I motioned for everyone to leave the stockroom, heading back into the main store and away from the horror in front of us. Is it bad if I'm jealous of him? Honestly, at the rate this is playing out, taking myself out doesn't seem like the worst option there is. It's better than nodding off and having my spine rip out anyway. Exhaustion began setting in harder around then, with my irritability immediately beginning to turn up as my tiredness had mounted. Tattoo and Binoculars were still crying. Strange Face wandered off to do his own thing, though I'm not sure what that involved. Sarah was near catatonic at this point, staring off into blank space behind her register, standing at attention like she was waiting for items to come down the line. The crying began to get on my nerves, sending me elsewhere to try and find something else to keep my mind busy. It started to get dark outside, lightning still popping through the clouds on occasion, when I found a small pocket radio on one of the shelves in the back. I swear as I was walking around back there, Steak was following my every move though. At some point I'm pretty sure that I saw him swivel around on his pole, trying to get a better look at what I was doing. When I checked him though, he had no pulse, eyes glazed over in death. Nonetheless, the feeling persisted. It took me a minute to find batteries for the radio, but turning it on got me nothing. Just static on every station, blaring out with the same dull drone. I was about to give up when it suddenly shifted, a monotone voice coming over the tinny speaker.
Stay awake until the alert is lifted. Thank you. Attention, collective personnel are on site to assess the situation. If you have found yourself in a Class 4 night terror, please do not be alarmed. Stay where you are, find the nearest weapon, and defend yourself. Please stay awake until the alert is lifted. Thank you.
It cut off after that, and I shook my head. My eyes were beginning to burn from the lack of sleep, drying out something terrible. I pushed the radio aside, not turning it off completely, but zoning out into a daydream for a moment.
Attention, collective personnel are on site to assess the situation. If you have found yourself in a Class 4 night terror, please do not be alarmed. Stay where you are, find the nearest weapon. Kill yourself.
My blood ran cold, hearing the new deviation on the instructions. A scream finished freezing it over at glacial temperatures only seconds later. From near the registers, a woman screamed, but also, oh God, the skittering, click-clack sound of the spines moving. Somebody fell asleep. Tattoo was the one. Her head was grotesquely stuck in the rafters of the grocery store, empty eye sockets staring down at us as our problems unfolded below. It was a macabre audience, but the spine bursting forth from her neck began to spew threads almost too thin for the eye to see. Little nerves spread through the air, feeling for anything near that they could latch onto. The spine just kept rising out of her, making me half expect to see her body collapse without it to hold everything to a center. The nerves grabbed onto binoculars and Sarah, bringing the two women in closer as they got a hold. Whatever it used to knock them out was effective though, because almost immediately it looked like they fell asleep. Within moments, their heads began to tear off, spines elongating out of the stumps to further stretch their necks until they had disconnected with loud pops. The white bone was covered in blood and viscera, with the vertebrae clacking together, appearing as spindly legs as parts of bone stretched and elongated. The strange man came walking out of the aisles nearby now, hands outstretched in reverence to the three-turned woman in front of him. He began to walk in closer, uncaring of the nerves reaching through the quickly unraveling spines. Their fibers twisted and fanned out around them, floating ever so close to him without touching as he seemed to dance in between them. Yes, embrace your exhaustion. Delicious, he said, doing one of the grossest things that I had ever seen in my life. He was licking the viscera off the contracting spines as they wriggled, taking in their taste and relishing it. I just ran, and I didn't stop. I burst through the back door of the market and I kept on running. Suddenly, I'm out on Main Street, small buildings on every side. It's deserted, quiet with nobody else out there but me. The thunder rumbles overhead as more purple and green lightning crack through the clouds. A burst of static comes through the radio in my right hand. I didn't even realize it until I grabbed it. The same warning was playing, now with the new ending running every time. Checking my watch revealed that I had lost another day and a half somewhere along the way. Where, who the hell knows? I just arrived here, I guess. I don't even remember where I was trying to go in the first place. A strap digs into my neck as I turn around, looking to see if there's any place to find safety. The shotgun. Holy shit. The shotgun is slung over my back. How did I get it back? Did I make the trip back to my car and then come back to the center of town? That didn't matter then. I could hear them, hundreds of them. There was just the skittering sounds of tiny jagged feet on the pavement all around me. The clickety-clack of vertebrae as they smacked and scraped past each other. I could see the nerves flying into the sky above before they all even got here. Massive spinal columns extending out of every single body from a bloody stump where the neck should be. There was a small flower shop to my right on the road that I tried to duck into, but I couldn't get through the door. Even worse, when I looked at the door to see if I could break the glass, I realized that it wasn't even glass. It was fake, just a picture on a wall showing a shop interior. A fake handle sticking out to fool idiots like me looking for safety. Oh, Perry, you must be tired. The strange man was back again, suddenly right in the middle of the crossed roads, looking right at me. His bushy eyebrows were furrowed, a small buck-toothed smile breaking through his lips. God, why did he seem so familiar but so terror-inducing? Everything about him just looked uncanny, off by the slightest bit. An imperfect imperfection of a human. Oh, just take a little nap. We'll make sure that nobody bothers you. What in the hell are you, man? What's going on? I asked, tears breaking through my voice. I was hoping to play with the rest of you more, you know. I mean, I've been starved, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to have some fun with all of you. He was gleeful at this point. I thought you said that your grandpa turned. Was that a lie? I asked now, trying to stall it while I figured something out. Anything. Behind the dozens of spines that were lined up on each street, blocking the way out, I noticed that same solid backdrop. We were stuck here in the scene of a nightmare. No way in or out. This guy must be the one causing it. Was it a lie? It did happen just like all nightmares happen. Every little synapse firing in your brain is a very real situation. Just one that only you ever experience. What happened to you in one person's dream might be different than what really happens to you. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. All this cryptic shit was just making me more frustrated, already irritable from the lack of sleep. The nerves from all those spines kept inching closer, moving in toward me. There wasn't any way out of here.
Attention, collective personnel are on site to assess the situation. If you found yourself in a Class 4 night terror, please do not be alarmed. Stay where you are and find the nearest weapon. Kill yourself.
The radio cut through blaring static in that same message. The strange man rolled his eyes, giving a loud groan. Those assholes. You know, they've kept me locked up for decades now. No wonder I've been able to eat so much. It's been forever since my last good meal. He began again. I pulled the shotgun off my back, hefting it at my shoulder and aiming it at him. He stopped, a look of surprise on his face as he walked closer, examining the shotgun from top to bottom before literally putting his eye to the barrel. Bang! My finger wasn't even on the trigger, but it still fired, blowing his brains out right in front of me. The entire top right half of his face was gone, back of the head included, and what was left of his mangled mouth was laughing maniacally. "You can't kill me on my home turf, Perry. Come on, be a good sport," he shouted as I fell back in fear, tasting the brain matter that had splattered upon the gun going off. It was everywhere, all over me, all over the street. There was too much of it to even make sense of from the wound. Too much for the short time that it had been open. And no head would have that many brains in it, right? They began piling on the street, blood pooling and running off into a sewer drain at the corner. Nerves kept coming closer, feeling their way toward me as the strange man laughed once more.
If you're hearing this, please end yourself before it's too late.
The static bursted through to another voice, less monotone and more human now. His look went from amused to pissed off. "Oh, come on, don't ruin more of my fun," he said, laughing once more as he made a finger gun at the radio going pew and blasting it to smithereens. "Those stuffy old geezers don't know what they're talking about anyway. Come on, Perry, you're the last one still here, last one standing, buddy. You survived this far, so what are you gonna do now?" The city around me faded away and I was suddenly in the middle of a raucous theme park, people bustling around in every direction. The strange man appeared, wearing mascot ears and eating a comically large cotton candy. "Are you gonna go to Disney? Have yourself a magical time," he said. The scene dropped out as soon as he came into view, water now flooding in from every direction, pouring over the edges of some invisible tank to sweep me away. I desperately reached for something to keep my balance, before feeling sand under my feet, solid ground once again. He appeared once more in comical tourist garb and a huge camera slung around his neck. He pushed the button on it, causing the flash to blind me, closing my eyes against the madness happening. An island vacation, maybe. Rest and rejuvenate. Flames burst to life everywhere, the smell of sulfur stinging at my nostrils. The bright light that blinded me only moments ago was replaced by molten fire, billowing from the ground below my feet. The heat was more intense than anything I had ever felt. "Or maybe you just let me drag your poor soul down to hell, huh? How about that, Perry?" His laughter echoed in every direction around me, making me want to claw my ears out. My sanity was slipping with every passing second, exhaustion tugging at my last shreds. Meanwhile, he fluttered around me like some demon, spewing hate and vitriol at me from every direction. "No, stop," I said, flipping over the shotgun and putting the barrel in my own mouth. I could hear him realize what I was doing before I even knew it, but it was too late to stop me. I pulled the trigger, feeling the explosion rip at the back of my throat in excruciating detail. But I was still alive. Everything hurt, my entire skull felt hot, and my eardrums were ruptured. But I was still alive. "You idiot," I could hear him, faintly through the dull throbbing of blood in my ears. I tried to talk back, but felt my jaw just fall away, unsupported by the muscle. Did I mess up that bad? "You aim too low, give me that." He went to snatch the shotgun away from me before I could try again, but I was dedicated and determined even. I hoisted myself back, tilting my head and holding it to the roof of my mouth. It probably looked like I was trying to play a dang shotgun saxophone the way that I was moving, but I needed the momentum. Taking a page out of Steak's book, I threw myself forward, pumping the shotgun as I started moving, and I slammed the butt of the weapon into the hard rock at my feet. I felt it fire off one more time, successfully blasting my skull apart into a billion little fragments. He screamed at me as the hell around me faded to black, a sweet abyss of death. I almost choked sitting up, gasping for air and feeling the cold tile under me as I scrambled to stand and run. Somebody pushed me back on the floor, shining a light into my eyes and holding them open. "Clear, he's clear," they shouted. "Give me a stretcher, the last one made it back." They were dressed in a nice suit, hair perfectly styled short. I looked up at the ceiling above me as hot bile burned in my throat, threatening to push its way up and out. Another man in a suit ran by, bringing a small medical kit with him. He began checking on me, taking blood pressure, vitals, anything that he could. "Where am I?" I asked, choking back the bile. "Wally's Grocer in Hazelwood, Georgia," the first agent that had shouted told me. "Do you remember what happened to you, sir?" "How did I get back here?" I asked, still unsure if I was going by the weird nightmare logic or actually got here in a real way. "You've been here for a few days, sir. Tell me, did you see this person during your ordeal?" He held up a rough sketch, showing a man with bushy eyebrows, a thick comb-over, and buck-tooth smile. The strange man who was pulling all the strings. All I could do was nod, still holding bile back. God, I was starving. A few days. The agent took my confirmation, beginning to talk into a monitor. "We have confirmation of a nocturne in the area. Please begin cleanse protocol," they said, getting an affirmative over the radio. The medical guy started to help me up and guiding me toward the door of the grocery store. We stepped out into bright sunlight, almost blinding me as I tried to adjust to it. When I finally did, the sight that met me was something that made me almost shut back down. Body bags lined up down the central street in town. Some fine, others with long, thick spinal cords stretched with vertebrae into small legs curling at the edge. No room to zip the bag around them. Oh my God. I fainted then and there, losing consciousness again. The next thing that I knew, I woke up in a hospital room, unsure of what was going on. The people who brought me here have been in and out, asking me every damn question imaginable, cross-referencing others that had talked to me and doing an entire investigation. From what one told me, this was a contained event, though most of Hazelwood was, well, dead. 3 days and a nightmare in the town collapsed, everyone giving into their exhaustion while that thing preyed on them. What a way to go. I saw Steak walking through the hallway outside my door earlier today. He was carrying a little bundle, talking to it and singing its songs. I noticed on one of his passes that a hand was sticking up from the bundle. Plastic, lifeless, but not to him. The nightmare was only beginning for him. No matter how much I've tried to get sleep since coming here, it just doesn't last for long. The night terrors were rough, the spines haunting me through any dream, no matter how good it starts. They said they're going to prescribe something for a dreamless sleep tonight. I hope it works. I stared with confusion at my phone. The rest of my friends were all in on this Monopoly game. "I swear to God, if you get free parking, I'll be literally done with you," said Evelyn. Ravi rolled the dice in his hands. "Come on, sweet baby Jesus, I just need a 4. He dropped them onto the board. "Come on," he said, promptly biffing it like always. I tried to make sense of it. Just a word on my screen, black text on an all-white background, a rather classical-looking font. Hide. I tapped rather impatiently on the expensive black rectangle. The text wouldn't disappear. "AJ," Evelyn called, like a teacher busting a student. "You're addicted. Play board games like a normal human adult." "Yeah, sorry." A few more desperate finger pecks at the screen, and then I turned to holding the power button down for an extended period. With my free hand, I grabbed the dice and rolled a 3. I landed on B&O Railroad. After 2 seconds of thought, "Nah, forget railroads," I said. Of course, we weren't animals. If somebody didn't want to buy a property, that was fine. No auctions or any of that nonsense. House rules. Back to the phone as Hero on my left took the cubes and prepared to drag his sorry little shoe across to go to collect his $200. A minute with the power button didn't do anything, and we were entering factory reset territory. I contemplated borrowing Ravi's laptop to Google whatever this might have been. I felt the apartment rumble, albeit just for a split second, as if we were on the edge of an earthquake. I tensed briefly. The background noise from the TV, "No One Wants This," autoplaying on Netflix, had disappeared, following the faint sound of the flicker of static. Ravi was the first to get up. "I don't," he said, talking slowly as if not to jinx it. "I don't think that was an earthquake." He examined the TV, confused at the outage. He checked the wires. "It shouldn't be the breaker. I don't have that much stuff plugged in. Wait, do I?" I grappled with the sad, likely hacked state of my phone and that weird word staring me down. "Yeah, that's weird," I heard Hero say, half laughing. Head lifted. "What?" I asked to catch Hero turning his phone to me. His home screen too had been replaced by black text atop a white background. Hide. Evelyn, as anti-technology as it comes, had properly clocked this reprieve as her time to quickly respond to long outstanding texts. "What the?" she said. "What is this?" At my confused look, bordering on a scowl or a resting scowl face, she flipped her phone around to show me the damage. It was the same on hers. I grew a bit nervous. "Ravi, where's your phone at?" I asked him. "Oh, I'm sure it's somewhere," he said, still tinkering with the TV. Likely not due to any of his troubleshooting, it flashed back to life, red power light at the base blinking steadily. A simple message now appeared on the big screen. "Hide?" Ravi asked, grabbing the remote and pressing buttons to switch back to Netflix, but nothing was registering. "Dude," I said. He turned around and I showed him my phone. Hero and Evelyn showed theirs as well. "That's..." He looked back at the TV and then at us again. "Wait, how is that possible? Is that like an Amber Alert?" Hero asked. "I mean, I guess, but that's a push notification. This is like completely overtaking the screen." Ravi's eyebrows furrowed. "On different hardware too." "A hack?" I asked. He shrugged. "That's kind of a weird hack, no?" "Government experiment," Hero again. A thought came over me. I walked to the balcony, slid the door open and stepped out onto it. Eye of Sauron the city from Ravi's 14th floor apartment. In the neighboring apartment towers, most of the units had blinds down and curtains closed. The few that were unshuttered, however, I felt like that guy from Rear Window, contained strangers staring perplexed at their phones, at their computers. The sides of bolted-to-the-wall TVs, barely visible to me, displayed the same white background with the text atop it. What I was seeing, everybody else was seeing. The others joined me on the balcony. "Whatever it is, it's at least hit this block," I said. I looked down at the city streets. Most of the people below caught in a similar holding pattern of standing frozen, heads fixed to their phones. "I guess we don't have anything to call the cops with," Hero said. "Oh, I'm sure they're aware." "Maybe wait it out until they fix it," Ravi said. I nodded, and yet I could tell that Evelyn was a bit perturbed, forcing magnetic thoughts to imbue her silence with weight. "Thoughts?" I asked her. "I mean, should we do it?" she asked. "Do what?" Ravi questioned. "Hide." "Hide where?" "Oh, I don't know." I mean, we're already in my apartment. I'm sure that's good enough, right? He said. A pause. Let's not lose our heads, Ravi continued. This is nuts, but it's not. I mean, it's not like literally hide, right? Hiro clicked his fingers. What if it's viral marketing like for a movie? Hiro with the necessary but unintentional levity. Hacking our phones so that we can't use them. I don't know if that's in Liongate's purview, man, I said, and then my head turned to Evelyn. But hide. The flicker in her eyes more than meant that she had sided with the light bulb in her head. She returned to the inside and got to exploring Ravi's apartment carefully. What are you doing? Ravi asked, trailing. Hiro and I followed. I don't care if I look stupid. It could be a warning. Maybe something is happening, she said. We're in a box basically, said Ravi. We're fine, Ev. But the thing, she motioned to the TV and then to her phone. It says hide. Maybe it's that literal. She continued scouting, finally settling on the sliding closet in Ravi's room, the best that she could come up with in his 600 square foot quarters. I'll do here unless you think there's better. Evelyn, Ravi stressed. She shuffled in past some clothes, scooching to the end to make some space. I'm gonna close the door soon, and if you're all really my friends, you'll join me. There was awkward silence until Hiro chimed in. I mean, I guess it's good to be safe, right? He went for it, second-guessed for a second, and then committed to entering. You guys get the luxury of laughing at me forever if I'm dumb. It's a win-win, she called while Hiro wedged in beside her. A compelling argument, certainly. Begrudgingly, I followed, tucking in next under Ravi's dress clothes. There was still room for him inside his own closet. Oh, come on, he caved, joining last, sliding the door closed to introduce darkness. I went back to my phone. Still that classical font, still that mandate. How long do we have to stay in here? Ravi asked. 5 minutes, she said. Yeesh, he tagged. And then we sat in stillness for a while. Distant tick-tick-ticks of the clock in the living room bringing down the blood pressure a tad. It all felt silly, kind of fun. Remember when we went camping at Sunlight Groves? Hiro asked. Glamping, Ravi clarified. Ev thought that you saw a bear. Hiro laughed. A bear and its cub. Hey, it was dark and it looked like bears, she said, half laughing herself, and I heard noises too. Bears at Sunlight Groves, he said again. Saddest patch of trees in America. Guys, shut up. We're here, so let's commit to the bit. Before the conjuring doll gets us, said Ravi, surprisingly not bitterly. And we kept our traps zipped for another minute. I looked at my phone again. Hide. Nonsensical, all of it really, but in a way that was starting to sit more and more uncomfortably for me. What do you think it is? Hiro whispered. I shook my head, Evelyn with the light shrug, Ravi with a deep inhale before speaking. I mean, obviously sophisticated, he said, voice low. Like it's obviously something. I waved my phone. My bank is on this and it's brick now basically. I'm screwed. Nah, they'll figure something out, said Ravi. Powerful knocks came at his apartment door all of a sudden, thundering. Hey, a voice called, muffled through the walls. Ravi, are you there? Evelyn braced. Who is that? Oh, a skinwalker, obviously, replied Ravi. Oh, kidding, it's my neighbor Monica. Evelyn reached across me and Hiro to tug at Ravi's sleeve. Are you positive? Yes, and I should probably get it. You said 5 minutes, she said. Yeah, but I'm being a pretty trash neighbor right now, he replied. The knocking persisted. So did the words. I have this weird thing on my phone and Brad has it too. It says hide. The TV says the same thing, computer same thing. I don't know how to reach anyone or what to do. The neighbor trailed on. Ravi blew air out of his nose. Alright, this is stupid. I'm gonna... "No," said Evelyn, but then all of a sudden, he stopped. We all stopped. I felt something very, very real. No knocking anymore, or at least I couldn't hear anything. Not the tick of the clock, nor the soft rustle of us against clothing. It was like the world was holding its breath, like there was a presence right outside the closet. And then the sting of static in my ear before it passed. Whatever it was, the feeling had dissipated and the sound returned, and I sneaked a glance at my phone. The word hide was gone, and replacing it was my home screen. The silence between the four of us was uncomfortable. "Did you feel that?" Evelyn finally whispered. No one said anything. Ravi outstretched his arm yet again to slide the door open, but his hands were shaking. "You can do it," I whispered. "I think we're good." He steeled himself, looking very much like he was crossing some sort of internal threshold. He pulled the door aside, revealing his room exactly as we had left it. We took it in. "I'm gonna go answer Monica," he said, with not a whole lot of vigor to his voice, getting up and creeping out of the room. The rest of us followed, stopping in the living room while he continued to the door. I went to Twitter, searched hide, and then sorted by new. Evelyn, meanwhile, grabbed the remote from the stand and turned the TV, now hideless, on and maneuvered through the Roku channels. "What are you looking for?" Hero asked. "Just like a live channel, I guess," she replied. "The news." My scrolling wasn't yielding anything of help or insight, though it was clear via the confused posts from seemingly around the whole world that the scope of whatever had happened was global. My focus shifted to Ravi, who was standing on the welcome mat, eyes pressed against the door's peephole. He hadn't moved in quite some time. "Is everything all right, man?" I asked. He didn't reply, just stood there frozen. I approached slowly. She's... I heard him croak. I reached him, patting him on the shoulders and urging him to detach from the door viewer. He finally did, leaning against the wall at first before slowly sliding to a seat on the floor. I peered into the hallway through the hole. Outside, his neighbor, the one knocking, it looked like she had been skewered, decimated. An explosion of red in the hallway. "What?" I felt a buzz on my phone. I pulled it out. Again. Before I could even process, I heard Ravi and Evelyn react. "There's another one. It says again now." I turned to see the foreboding word on the TV. "No." "So should we hide again?" Hero called. Much like Ravi, I was shell-shocked. "AJ, what do you think that we should do?" he repeated. "Evelyn," I said, trying to force the words out of my mouth. "You had good instincts the first time. What do you think?" "How much time do you think we have?" she asked. How much time had passed between when I first saw the word hide and when we felt that presence in the closet? "It might have been 10 minutes. I heard Ravi mutter, almost lifeless. "I don't." And then Evelyn interrupted herself. "Wait, what did you just see outside?" She started approaching the door and I stopped her. I don't think that it'll be good for you to see it." "Are you serious?" she responded. "Yes," I said, immediately realizing that lying might have been smarter. "We can't assume that we have the same amount of time," Ravi added. I went with my pitch. "Do we try the same spot?" Hero started pacing, thinking, and tapping his foot. If we think about it, it said hide and we hid. Now it says again, and obviously that means that whatever happened, it's going to happen again." He gave us a look as if he could see, in our drained expressions, what was waiting on the other side of the door. That's a great recap, man," I said. "What I mean," he said, struggling, "is that when you would play as a kid, if you kept picking the same spot over and over, eventually it would catch up to you." "Are we really trying to apply some sort of logic to this?" Ravi mumbled. Evelyn fortified herself. "I think he's right. It's nuts, and I can't believe that I'm saying this, but we need to operate on gut. And gut tells me that we pick better spots this time. But spots makes it sound like we should split up. I said, looking around, slowly realizing that the limited real estate that we had to work with meant this suggestion made more sense than I would have liked. I turned to Ravi. Where should we all go? He shook his head, palmed his forehead a few times as if to slap himself back to reality. We do, he started thinking. Two under my bed, he grimaced, letting neurons collide in his mind. One of us in the utility closet, the other the laundry closet. He got up and pointed. One of the closets was right behind me. Life in him again. Now. My eyes flitted to Hero and Evelyn, who ran into the bedroom. Ravi gave me a nod before entering the laundry closet and awkwardly squeezing in with the washer and dryer closing his door. I entered the utility closet and I closed mine. Rather, I tried to. The door wasn't clicking shut. Crap, I said. Ravi, the door, it's not. But then I fought the urge to say anything more. If time was up, I would compromise my spot. Compromise his spot too if I kept talking. I tried a few more times to get it to close and then I committed, terrified out of my mind, to gripping the handle and holding the door shut. I tried to keep my shaking hand and quickening breath in check as the silence overtook again. Complete silence, and then that presence. I felt a light tug at the door. I kept my hold firm, but I didn't try to overpower, didn't want to completely give it away. And again it stopped. The feeling disappeared, and I waited 15 seconds before sneaking a look at my phone to see that the again warning was gone. I heard the sound of Ravi's door swing open first, and I followed with mine. He was emotional. I forgot that door is messed up. I got scared, man, and I was, hey, you're all good. It's all right, man, I know. I even heard you call for me and I didn't. I panicked and I thought that it would, hey, we're alive, man, it's all right, we're. And I immediately remembered it wasn't just us. Evelyn and Hero. Right, he said. We rushed to his bedroom. Nothing, at first. The two hadn't emerged yet. For a moment, the horrifying thought that we would be pulling their corpses out from under the bed rushed past me. Guys, I said. Coast is clear, quick. Silence. For quite some time before they finally shuffled out in one piece alive. As they shifted from crawl to bend to standing, I wanted to hold them. Hold everyone for just a second. I felt a newfound appreciation for life in their faces and personalities. Another buzz on my phone, and I took a look. Break time. I let out a sigh of relief and showed the message to the others. Well, I guess that's good, Evelyn said. A second to catch our breaths after all this craziness. But then what? Ravi asked. Is this just gonna continue? We walked into the living room together nervously. We haven't even gotten a single second to wrap our heads around this, Evelyn said again. Something in me didn't seem right. I didn't feel good. Hey Ev, how did you know that we should have stayed in the closet for 5 minutes? Hero asked, somewhat pointedly. I clocked a minor annoyance in her face at the question. I didn't know anything, it was a guess. I mean, yeah, you guys were lucky that I was here and I pushed for it, because God, you were all being stubborn. Hero wore a strange expression as he looked at her. All right. Well, it sounds like you want to say something more, she said. Why would I? What makes you think that I would? Ravi interrupted Hero by stepping between the two of them. Keep your heads on, people. But as he said it, and maybe it was just an aberration in my mind, but I couldn't help but feel something significant stir within me. Something really inflame, as if even though his face was straight, he was concealing some sort of inner smile at what was happening. Hero, I think you're focusing your skepticism in the wrong direction, I said. Ravi's expression turned irritated, which all but confirmed it for me. I don't know if you want to be mad at the person that saved us the first time, I said, trying to make a point by motioning to Evelyn. But as I looked at her, something felt wrong there too. I contained it. Or rather, the person who wanted to open the closet door. And then something even more obvious hit me. Wait, Ravi, you tried to kill me. And all of a sudden, I was glaring at him, my temper rising by metric tons every second as if it was all starting to make sense. Evelyn and Hero joined me. Ravi looked incredulous. I already admitted that I messed up with the door. I confessed to you. Why are you trying to make things worse? I was trying to calm them down. And then, noticing us approach him, he backed towards the kitchen cabinets. He pointed at me. You were on your phone when this first happened, he said, as if he were having his own revelation. You were waiting for it to start. Well, that's an insane misdirect, I said, positive that I couldn't trust him. But as my eyes turned to Evelyn and Hero, I realized that I couldn't trust them either. I couldn't trust anyone. But still, Ravi absolutely needed to be the first to go, the first to be disposed of. He grabbed a knife from the cupboard and held it out at us, and only the smallest thought in the back of my mind was telling me that we were being toyed with, that it was so incredibly obvious that whatever this was, it had a handle on us. But unfortunately, that understanding was academic for me at best, as I kept finding string after string of thoughts and emotions connecting, everything adding up, the logic sound, my emotions inflamed. Break time, Evelyn said. It's breaking us. Of course she would know that though, if she were in on it. We all looked at her. I watched for sudden movements from any of these traitors. Even a millimeter shift wouldn't get past me. It's overriding us. It's flooding us with anger that isn't ours, and as real as it feels. She faced her phone at us, beckoning us to read it clearly. Break time. We can't fall to it. And that small grounded part of me took over, even though I was sure with everything in my soul that she, Ravi, and Hero were the source of everything that was happening. Ravi's grip on the knife tightened as he and the rest of us remained in the bizarre equilibrium of our four-way standoff. It's all of you, I thought to myself, before I felt a lightness overtake me. Like an insatiable hunger fading or extreme fear dissipating when you realize that noise in the other room wasn't a person but rather something knocking over, my feelings of unrest and paranoia were gone. My phone screen once again returned to its default background. It was hard to describe how I felt now. Lucidity, shame. I looked at Ravi sadly. His head hung low as he put the knife back in its place. Hero turned to Evelyn first. I'm sorry, he said, and then to Ravi. Sorry. Yeah, sorry guys, Ravi said. I'm sorry, I said as well. Yeah, you're welcome, Evelyn said. We deserve that. That was insane. Like a messed up roller coaster ride. That wasn't totally me, Hero said. Like something was in me and it was. Hey, it's okay, man. I was getting tired of saying it, and certainly I out of everyone didn't deserve to impact forgiveness anyway, after where my own head was at only 30 seconds ago. We need to write something down, we are susceptible, don't forget, started Ravi. We just need to remember to keep our heads on, I interrupted. Remember. But I think the fear that, again, would pop up on our phones drove him to start rummaging for some paper, start scribbling some words on it, while the rest of us tried to soak in the reprieve of nothing happening. Every half second a luxury. I wanted to say sorry another 20 or so times, something that I was sure wasn't a feeling unique to me. I feel like I'm losing myself, I said. It felt like I was in a dream at this point. Yeah, said Ravi. Yeah. Hero said, looking at us carefully. We're probably all gonna die. Should we say our words, I guess? Don't talk like that, said Evelyn. How many people do you think are dead? Hero asked. I went to the TV, temporarily free yet again from 1 or 2 word mandates. I turned it on and toggled through the homepage until I found a live stream of a soccer game. One fixed camera angle, everybody in the stadium torn apart. Players on the field within frame eviscerated. I returned to the homepage and navigating in an attempt to find a different live program. I clicked on what appeared to be a news channel that I hadn't heard of before. The sight of an empty desk appeared. Wires leading under the desk made me think that perhaps the anchor was hiding under it.
"We are trying to report,"
he said.
"and knowing that the signal is going to cut out, I've survived so far. Survived whatever exactly this might be. But the carnage from footage that I've seen is extensive. I strongly recommend."
The broadcast was interrupted by the new word, "Seek," again in classical lettering, and the screen cracked and then shattered with a loud pop, sending bits of glass onto the floor, as did the screen on my phone that I had placed on the coffee table, as did the phones in Evelyn and Hero's hands too, reactively dropped on the floor by the pair, a weak bounce before settling. I panicked. "Seek, seek," I said desperately, trying to jolt my brain to the task. "Maybe something out of place," Evelyn said. "What if we have to find what's killing everyone?" said Hero. I started, but I couldn't even muster up a close to the sentence. I ran to the balcony, outside to see if there was something obvious to look for, in the sky or in the city. What I spotted on the neighboring high-rises was blood-stained curtains, unrecognizable bodies where blinds were lifted, and as my eyes darted from spot to spot, a lead. A small TV in one of the apartments. The screen looked unbroken. A word on it that I couldn't make out. 5 letters was the best that I could do. "It's the screens," I said. "We need to find a screen that still works." I ran back into the living room. "Does anyone have binoculars?" They all looked at me. "Why would anybody have binoculars?" Robbie asked. There's a screen, I think, in one of the other apartment buildings and it's working. There's a word, but I can't see it. We need to find another one. I don't know, I ran into Robbie's office. Computer screen broken. I grabbed his laptop. Shattered. Nope. I nervously tapped my chest with the fingertips of both my hands while the rest desperately searched for something viable too. Did I have to run to the other apartment? Would there even be enough time? How would I even get in? And then, like a bolt of the blue, it hit me. "Robbie, where's your phone?" His voice was a little confused. "I don't know, man, I lose it all the time." "Find it." "You really think that's it?" "We're looking for a functioning screen. It's the only one that we haven't ruled out yet." I turned to Hero next. "Check out the other apartments on this floor. See if any of the doors are unlocked. If they are, go inside, check everything, phones, laptops, TVs, it doesn't matter. See if there's a message intact on any of them." "On it," he said, rushing to the door, opening it, freaking out at the body in front of it, nearly tripping and then composing himself and rushing into the hallway as the door closed behind him. We tore apart Ravi's apartment next. "Couch cushions. Where do you usually lose it?" I asked. My head peeked under the bed, peeked into counters alongside Evelyn desperately. "I don't know, man," he answered. "It's stupid, but sometimes I literally just chuck it across the room." Helpful, supremely helpful. In the bathroom, I looked in the medicine cabinet, and then back into his room to his closet, checking the pockets of all his pants. I started to feel the inevitable looming. This was the one that was going to kill us, wasn't it? "I love you guys," I heard Evelyn say almost under her breath, like she could feel it too. No tangible ticker counting down, but a feeling in my chest. A train closing in with us tied to the tracks. Ravi running to the TV stand, looking behind and then under books, under shelves. And I was back in the living room again. Sure, there was nothing left, my eyes lowering to the painful game that we had started our deadly evening with. Monopoly. Specifically to the messy pile of 50s, 20s, and 10s on Robbie's side of the board. I knew his etiquette for swapping some of them out for hundreds was quite poor. The cash stacked high, which made sense. He was cruising all game, and yet, I crouched and did an even more aggressive sweep of the spot that we had started our desperate search at, to discover his preserved Samsung Galaxy A35 underneath the fake money, with a new word to greet me. Smile. And it really did feel like time was up this time. "I found it, you have to smile," I screamed like an auctioneer. Evelyn turned first from her spot in the kitchen. "What?" I ripped the phone from the ground and held up the message to her. "Smile." She mirrored my uncomfortable expression, all teeth, feigned happiness, as did Ravi as he bolted out of the room before even seeing the message on the phone or my intense eyes. Hero threw open the door. "Couldn't find anything, I'm sorry," he screamed. He saw our wide smiling faces and our eyes screaming at him to get the hint as I tried to mouth the word while keeping my pose, but instead it sounded like "smoo." And yet, despite the confusing sight, with the luckiest stroke in the world, he copied and showed me those pearly whites. I retained my beaming smile, feeling a tear of fear travel down my cheek, my eyes glued to Ravi's phone in my hand, hoping and praying that we wouldn't all get torn apart. And the word disappeared. I showed the group the proof, and one by one our cheery expressions dropped to our default nervous frowns. Resting scowl face restored. A collective exhale. "I can't do this," said Ravi. "I know," Evelyn added. And unlike some of the gaps that we've been afforded in the past, I already spotted a new message on the single remaining functional phone left in my right hand. Point to sacrifice. I could feel the group's eyes on me. I couldn't hide the misery. "What?" Ravi asked. "Point to sacrifice," I said, barely legible. "AJ?" Evelyn asked. I tilted the phone so that they could read it. I couldn't say the words any louder, my body wouldn't let me. Underneath the words, a timer had been running, one that was already down to 1:45, 1:44, 1:43, by the time that I flashed them the phone. And yet still, all of us needed more seconds to let it settle. I felt defeated, truly this time. "All right," said Ravi, cutting through the holding pattern. "So what? We talk it through with the time that we have left. Maybe we all agree on somebody to point at. I mean, hey, who knows what I have to live for? Hero next. My family, mom, dad, siblings. I wasn't even thinking of them this whole time. They're all probably dead, but they..." "Yeah," I interrupted, his words hitting me immediately and curbing any remaining social etiquette that I had left. Everyone that I had ever known was likely gone. Wow. Evelyn smiled at us softly. "I just have you guys now," she said. "So, yeah, screw this," she said, immediately pointing to herself, almost causing me to die right there in fear that she would be torn apart immediately, but the counter was still ticking down. "I flipped the board on this," she said, without wavering. 112, 111, 110. Hero pointed to himself. "Yeah, you know what, I flipped the board too," he said. I looked at him, almost nervously exasperated. "Really, after all that, guys?" 107, 106, 105. "If there is an afterlife," Ravi said. "Unlikely, but what the heck? Maybe we dodged that bullet." He curled his index finger back towards himself. "Flip the board." I just looked at them. It was strange to feel a deluge of selfish thoughts flood into me all at once. 40, 39, 38. "All right," I said, copying my peers. "Let's do it." I pointed at myself like we were all playing Simon Says or something. 33, 32, 31. I took an appreciative look at my old friends, the longest standing friends that I had ever had in my stupid life, and then at the Monopoly board that we were playing on. It really was quite an awful game. I wasn't sure why we would always subject ourselves to it. 27, 26. I saw the pile of money on free parking. 23, 22. The only way to make it fun was to play with dumb rules, house rules. 20, 19. Wait, I said. Follow me. I sprinted to the door. I opened it and I held it open for the rest. 15, 14, 13. I pointed at Ravi's dead neighbor in the hallway in front of the door, Monica. We didn't know what we were dealing with until she died. Her sacrifice gave us a chance, I said, almost looking up as if I was speaking to whoever was enacting this terror upon us. I was aware that it was a reach. 9, 8. And we've probably lost a lot of humanity since then. So sorry, I said, pointing at her. And thank you. 6, 5. And my best friends pointed too. A real morbid way to close things out with a clash of sorry and thank you escaping them as what would likely be their last words. I had really interrupted what was quite a nice moment inside for this strangeness. 2, 1, 0. House rules, I said. And then I prepared myself for it. Pain, and then annihilation. But nothing came. Instead, Ravi's phone in my hand just read, "Good game," before defaulting to Ravi's homepage picture, a Borzo. He didn't even own one, he was just obsessed with that breed of dog. We stood there for 10 minutes it felt before we finally ventured inside single file like a group of polite zombies. I wasn't sure what to make of what had happened, what to do, who to check on, the state of the world, what was going on around me. I sat back down at the Monopoly board. The others, in an almost Manchurian candidate sort of way, took their spots too. I think it was my turn, I said slowly. I grabbed the dice and I rolled. It was a 10. I tapped my top hat icon on each square until I landed on Shortline Railroad. Do you want to buy it? Evelyn asked me. I thought about it for too long. Finally, sure. Entry, August 16th, Tuesday, 2016. M. Callis. I'm writing this from a motel in Redstone, Colorado. I've been in the same room for the past 3 days and have only left to get snacks and bottled water. There haven't been any warnings on the TV yet, but I'm waiting. Will there even be warnings this time? Back in Glenwood Springs, where I'm from, it started with the warning, the emergency alert system. You know the sound, the sudden silence, and then these successive beeps followed by that flatline tone. When I heard the beeping and screeching, I assumed it wasn't anything to worry about. At most, a weather advisory. But how do you react when this comes up? Emergency Alert System, EDD authorities, issued an emergency action notification 1 mile distance from intersection 170 and Route 82. 3 minutes of preparation. Locate closest relations. Grab hands and sit where you are. Close your eyes and do not speak. Do not speak. Do not open your eyes. Ignore all sounds and do not react to touch. Failure to follow cautionary measures will result in detection. Warning will be lifted at sound of 4 short beeps followed by 1 extended. I want you to see this before going into the rest, because if you do see it, and I hope you never do, then all that you can do is take care of yourself. You'll want to help your parents or siblings or partners, but you can't. Please let me share this with you, as crazy as it might sound. It might help you. I lived with my mom in a small ranch house that sat close to the road just outside of town on Highway 6. The sun had just gone down and the sky still had errant remnants of fading colors. The sliding door leading to the small backyard was open and there was barely a breeze coming through. It had been a beautiful night, disturbed only by heavy and sporadic traffic. I didn't pay a lot of attention to it at the time, but it sounded like semis were making their way into town and then back out again. Mom was in the kitchen waiting for water to boil for tea as she went through her cell phone, which was charging in a nearby outlet. Lynn, my best friend, had stepped into the bathroom and I was relaxed on the couch watching something. It happened right then. A sound from the distance so potent and full of force it started as a rumble in my chest before I even heard it. The vibrations rolled through me, and before I could react, I heard a sound blasting in the distance. It was like a subaudible rumble followed by a muffled explosion, ending in what sounded like the last bits of water going down a recently unclogged drain. I froze and looked back at my mom. I heard it too. She was wide-eyed. The steam was just beginning to shoot from the kettle spout. I heard the bathroom door shut and Lynn came back, stopping at the couch. "Did you hear that?" Her hand was resting on her chest. "Yeah, and I felt it." I look at the open sliding door. "What do you think?" My phone went off. My mom's phone went off. The kettle reached its piercing shriek and she removed it from the stove. The TV went blank and began to buzz loudly. We read the message. I looked to my friend, my mom, and I saw their mouths forming the words, "Grab hands, do not speak." The wind picked up and night air spilled into the house. The smell was intermingled with ozone and decay. My mom went to the door and closed it. The lights went out. I saw dark shapes charging past the house out of town with strange blue-green lights emanating from their eyes. Lynn screamed but covered her mouth instantly. My stomach dropped 3 inches into my hips. Despite all of this, it was eerily silent outside. Aside from the wind pounding against the house, there were no screams and no frantic tires peeling down driveways. When Lynn grabbed my hand, I almost jumped. My mom sat next to me and the three of us eased onto the couch in the dark. Lynn whispered into the inky black, "Is this for real? It's like some bizarre test or a practical joke." I felt their hands in mine and knew that on some level we realized it wasn't a joke. The wind continued, but through it I heard something else. I heard the sound of a crowd talking, but it sounded like they were all speaking in whispers. I had this feeling of being far from them, but that I was drawing closer every second, because the cacophony of voices became larger but no more intelligible. "I think we should do like the warning said, at least until we hear the all clear," I said to both of them. They both agreed in small voices, and I could only assume they were closing their eyes like I had done. I have no idea how long we sat there. The sound of voices grew, but it dissipated slightly as if scattered by the gusts outside. Still, I heard no human voices outside, no boots pounding on the road or the sound of engines. And then a few things happened almost at once. I felt a few puffs of cold air came from the left and then the right, moving across my face and tossing my hair. Whispers were carried on them, but I only caught snippets. "Where is she? That nasty little thing. He's next." Some crying and sniffling. It sounded like it was coming from a child. Time. More time. My mom's hand clenched in mine. It was dry, but the way in which she held it felt different. The fingers moved one by one in succession, the thumb rubbing the top of my hand. It felt so familiar, and though I can admit now that I realized right then why I remembered that touch, I couldn't in the moment. I heard the sharp intake of breath, followed by a slow, rattling exhale. It made my blood run with ice. It sounded final. Mom's voice came out dry, papery, and tired. "I've missed you, but you've got to get out of here, bub. They're frenzied and craving life again. It's a thirst you can't imagine." This was said urgently, sadly. "Please, sweetie, get in the car and go." It sounded so strained, so worried. My mind was racing and Lynn's hand was beyond sweaty. She had heard it too. I knew the voice and I knew that I trusted it. But the warning. As I was trying to think of where the car keys were, Lynn's hand clenched in mine painfully hard. She convulsed on the couch and cried out. I couldn't help myself and I looked over at her. When I opened my eyes, I found her face 4 inches from mine with her eyes closed, breathing heavily through her nose. "Lynn?" I asked in a whisper. "You're nasty. It should have been you." Lynn's voice was hard and cruel. She reached my arm towards her and my fingers slipped from my mom's hand. I won't detail the grappling fight we had, partially because the events of that night were so sudden and confusing that I hardly remember specifics. I left her writhing on the floor, yelling incoherently, and I ran to the kitchen, grabbing the keys off the key rack, and I felt my way to the garage door in the darkness. The scratches that she gave hurt, but the tears had fallen from my eyes, so the already dark and confusing world I saw was at least clear, not blurry. I had no idea what was happening, and I knew that I was in danger merely by moving, breathing heavily and loudly, and for having my eyes open. Mom's car rolled onto the street, and I went south down 6. The town was dark. The shops were all deserted, but maybe people were just sitting and holding hands, eyes closed and waiting. I saw a few people walking slowly in the streets. A few were running, taking clunky, uncoordinated steps. They looked confused and some looked angry. As I approached the edges of town, I saw a blockade with a small opening in the middle of the road. Men and women in black uniforms and glowing blue and green eyes watched me as I approached. They began to converge on the gap, with strange, brass-looking tools in their hands. I began crying as I sped up and surged through them. A few screamed as I almost clipped them with a car. They watched me leave with their strange eyes. What good is a blockade if they let people through? Did I do something or not do something that put them at ease as I drove? Were there others, and where did they go? Why were their eyes glowing? I couldn't shake that they felt like military, but most important of all, what the heck had I experienced? The speed with which these events took place left me dizzy, and it took some time for my mind to settle. So I've been sitting in this motel room, wondering about all this, and I think I'm starting to put it together. The first piece that came to me was the acceptance that the voice I heard and the touch I felt were my father's. I didn't want to believe that because he's been dead for 6 years now. A sudden stroke took him as he worked in the garage one morning. He's the only one who called me Bob. I'm going to stop here because it's as far as I've gotten. I want to return, but I don't know what I'll find or even if I'll be allowed back. There's been nothing broadcasted on the news. I have been contacted by an EDD official named Eldridge. He wants to speak with me about the events of that night. I meet with him tomorrow. Hopefully I'll get some answers to all of this. August 18th, Thursday, 2016. M. Callis. I did as some suggested, and I met Eldridge in a public place. He was almost aggressively ordinary in appearance, somewhere between 35 and 45. His eyes and his demeanor conveyed a kind but sterile personality. Below is what he told me. He gave me clearance to write this down and pass it on. He said that he wants to get this out into the open, even if it is in the smallest of ways. The higher-ups aren't reacting how they should be to this, so maybe this will subvert their orders to remain tight-lipped. His words. We met at a local coffee shop. Amidst the normal sounds in the conversation, we took a seat in the back. I stirred my black coffee as he talked. The EDD referred to in the emergency message is called the Extraliminal Defense Department. It was started in the late 1930s when rumors of the Germans experimenting into the paranormal began circulating, although it was said to have stopped in the early 40s after the Philadelphia experiment. Google it, I had to. Operations continued. He was brief with me on details and he glazed over a lot. But the turning point for the EDD was when a breakthrough was made in relation to the afterlife, or more accurately, a liminal phase, as they call it. Don't ask because I don't know how and he didn't say, but they determined that to some extent humans can exist beyond death. It's not life after death. He was adamant about that. They found that there's a plane of existence or a way of being after death. It is something to do with our emotions. Eldridge explained it like this. Individuals create patterns in their brains throughout life relating to events, situations, or circumstances, and these are linked inextricably to emotions. These create what you can think of as ruts in the road, or a well-worn path related to a thought pattern. People carve these ruts deep as time passes. In many cases, the patterns are negative in nature, though in some cases they are positive. In general, it's negative thinking patterns though. Individuals that pass on with deep ruts associated with one emotion or a few often feel these emotions more strongly than others. These emotions are somehow the catalyst for perpetuation beyond physical existence. There's a desire to keep those ruts deep and fresh. I thought of old ghost stories where people die angry or in deep sorrow, and their spirits linger forever. I told him this and he said it's very much along those lines, although much more complex and less Stephen King. It's an inability to let go in some ways. We can't explain it too in depth, but the science that's been worked out is beyond me and definitely beyond you, he explained with no condescension in his voice. Cut to 1995. Facilities have been built across the United States, 5 of them. Colorado, South Texas, West Virginia, Maine, and Arizona. These facilities contain the culmination of the R&D done for the EDD, both privately and government funded. Each facility has its own liminal gateway equipment designed to generate a space to bring these manifestations, or ghosts you could say, into being. They're called shadows to those in the know apparently. The catch is that enormous amounts of energy need to be fed into the shadows to make them corporeal. This tends to result in a gross amplification of the shadow's personality and their emotional state. All 5 facilities operate simultaneously or not at all. Despite their geographic distance, they share some sort of ley lines that power the devices with enough energy to complete the shadow infusion process. All are set to operate by specific key players in the EDD. The problem is that if less than 5 are used at once, more power is fed into the active devices by default of the ley lines, which can have potentially devastating consequences. Colorado's site was the only one running the night of August 16th. The messed up thing, pardon me. No, you're right, it's all messed up. He smiled. Yes, while the problem that we didn't foresee was the ability of a shadow to escape the liminal containment field. I was lost with this comment, but he muttered something about the infusion plates operating at unregulated rates and a crack in the containment lid. In 2013, he explained, a manifestation escaped and entered into a research scientist's body. The woman in question immediately became violent, her behavior erratic. She injured a few others on the floor before being subdued, and the machine's sequence shut down across the country. Her original personality never returned, and for the past 3 years, she's been held in a secure EDD facility. The behavior ebbs and flows, but she won't answer to her name anymore, and has accurately provided details into a life that she should know nothing about. This has since been dubbed supplanting. It's as scary as it sounds. Not necessarily a body snatcher, but a body switcher, with the caveat that the person whose body it is has nowhere to go after being supplanted. So they push you out of your body and take over. EDD scientists don't know where you go or what happens to you after being supplanted. So far, there have been 11 cases across EDD facilities. And these people they're not themselves anymore. I thought of the words spoken to me that night. You've got to get out of there, bub. That wasn't my mother, not anymore at least. But did that mean? Eldridge tore at the cardboard of his now empty coffee cup. No, not anymore. The ones who are still alive, that is to say, are not who they used to be. 3 out of those 11 killed themselves. Why? It was all that I could ask. We suspect that the intruding manifestation couldn't cope with its new body, its new state of existence, but we don't really know for sure. He glanced at his watch and then out the window into the sunlight. I have to leave soon. I wanted to meet for 2 reasons. The first I already covered. I wanted the history of this, at least some semblance of it out there. What the government and the EDD are struggling with needs at least some light shed on it. We're playing with dangerous, volatile, and at best, poorly understood forces. Forgive the hypocrisy of my current official station, but that doesn't sit well with me morally. The second and more official reason that I'm here is because I need to know your experience. We found your mother in your house and the remains of what appeared to be a fight. I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. The events of that night had played over in my head a million times, and I knew that he had read my posting on it, otherwise we wouldn't be meeting. Still, I explained it to him. He listened silently, taking notes. He looked up when I explained about my father. What was your father's name? Charleston, but everybody called him Charlie. Never Charles, he hated that. I thought again of the touch of my mother's hand as my father spoke through her. Eldridge was silent for a moment. He clicked his pen and shut the notebook. Thank you, Miss Callis. I have to head back to town. Glenwood, does that mean? No, it doesn't. I asked quickly. Were there others who got out? He turned to leave, his back to me, and he shook his head. No. Wait, I got up and followed him. It feels like you told me a lot but barely anything of worth. That information is worth more than my life in some ways. Believe me. Yes, well, tears welled in my eyes. My mother's gone according to you, and that's probably true if I can trust what I feel in my heart. But my father seemed to speak to me, which seems impossible since he died 6 years ago, and my home is apparently off limits. Yet no one outside of Glenwood seems to have any idea what happened. My voice had risen and a couple close to us looked over uncomfortably. Eldridge glanced around hastily and led me outside. Car keys in hand, his voice dropped to a whisper. The night of August 16th at approximately 1900 hours, the device outside of your town was engaged. The other 4 were dormant. We're determining how this happened, but it's somewhat hard given that the facility is largely destroyed. The conductors aren't meant to handle that much energy, with no containment field. Containment field? I must be crazy showing you this. He grabbed a napkin and drew this. This is more or less what a piece of the device looks like. Those 5 structures. He pointed to them. They are melted beyond recognition. We don't know how it was turned on, but this now puts the other 4 at risk. So this device is activated. It goes nuclear essentially, opens a door for the manifestation. Manifestations, plural. Manifestations to come through, and then what? Well, then the door was shut and the key was melted. The EDD currently has operatives containing what they can, but we're looking at what I think can be ironically called a ghost town now. I say again, the town is lost. His keys jingled and he shifted. I have to go. He handed me a business card. If you remember anything else, contact me. Do not attempt to go back, do you understand me? I numbly took the card and nodded. He patted my arm awkwardly and he laughed. And now I'm back in my small room. This is what I remember from the conversation. Do with it what you will. I want to mourn my mother, but there's a bizarre sense of hope with the knowledge that my father is somehow still around. It's masking those sorrowful feelings, for now at least. I'm going to go back. I can walk and camp my way there. I have to begin tonight. The last 4 days have culminated in nothing but empty takeout containers and confusion. There has to be something that I can do, some way that I can see my parents again. I'll keep you all updated in the next few days as best as I can. Entry, August 20th, Saturday, 2016. M. Callis. The grief was nearer than I thought. I posted the last update and everything swept over me. It's hard to convey, but the sheer terror of knowing that this has happened, paired with the apparent death of my mother, overwhelmed me. The thought of going back to Glenwood was exciting, but that feeling disappeared quickly. I wanted to get out of Redstone. I needed to fill the space in my head with something other than worry and grief. I very roughly pushed this down and covered it, until it was a dull throb in the background of my mind. By Friday, I was in motion. I thankfully had my mom's credit cards, and she had left her purse in the car, so I bought a single tent, backpack, a change of clothes, a battery source for my laptop, and some other supplies. I finished prepping around 3 p.m. At 3:10, the power went out in Redstone. I checked outside my motel room door and saw quizzical faces appearing in the windows. Small clusters of people gathered outside. There was a sense of general confusion and annoyance. Returning to my room, I took a shower quickly to savor what I could of the hot water, and eventually, I left town by foot around 4 p.m. The power outage was bizarre and ominous, and I half expected to have my phone go off with that terrible emergency message, but nothing happened. The answer would be in Glenwood. It took me about 10.5 hours to get there, with some small breaks in between. Along the way, I saw roadblocks with heavy traffic being directed through detours. The EDD must have set up some sort of quarantine in order to keep others out and Glenwood residents in. I kept my distance and I continued along. Foot traffic through the wilderness didn't seem to be a top concern for them. I admit that when I finally got there, what I found in the late hours of the night chilled me. As I approached, I felt a hum in my chest similar to the one that I felt on August 16th. It wasn't followed by any explosion, but it grew as I got closer to town. Once I was close enough, I saw why. Spaced in intervals of about 120 feet apart were semi-sized truck flatbeds. On each one rested a tower, four-sided and slightly triangular in shape, 40 feet high, topped with a globe that was ringed with a flat band around its circumference. Dozens of these flatbeds ringed the town. They were as far as I could see, shrinking in the distance until I could cover them with my thumb. Countless cords as thick as my thigh ran from each. Suddenly, the power outage made sense. This much energy had to come from somewhere. And did the EDD release some false statement blaming a mechanical failure at the power plant? The humming was emanating from them, and a fine haze, not unlike heat rising from a hot road, hung in the space between each tower. I couldn't help but gasp. It's a containment field. The implications of this were frightening. In the distance, I could hear yelling, laughter, crying. It all sounded off. The laughter slightly too hysterical, the yelling persistently furious and full of red anger. The crying of a mourner at the edge of a freshly dug grave. It was overwhelming. I suddenly didn't want to try to get in. The events of the past few days were so fresh, the pain so new, that I wasn't sure that I had the strength. And so I sat down and unpacked to busy my hands. With my tent set up, I went inside and zipped the flap shut. The humming in my chest remained. I set an alarm on my watch and dozed for a while. I slept fitfully, and when the alarm went off at 3 a.m., I was happy to be awake. Eating a granola bar, I contemplated turning around. But what was there to go back to? Grabbing my backpack, I zipped my tent shut behind me and took off. I could see personnel carrying those strange devices in the distance, blue and green eyes alight. As I walked, I thought over what Eldridge had told me. My eyes had been closed when both my mom and Lynn were supplanted. The shadows felt like gusts of cold air, and I could still hear them. But could I have seen them? Maybe the strange eyes were some sort of defense against supplantation. Ocular implants, though. Were these people keeping watch, even human? These questions whirled like a dry wind in my mind, and before I knew it, I was within town limits. It was dark, so I wasn't terribly worried about being seen, but I crouched anyway. I made my way up to the west side of the Roaring Fork River, and I would have to cross before it connected to the Colorado. The sentries, I guess I can call them that now, were weaving in and out of the tower-generated haze, untouched as they patrolled. I reasoned that I should be alright too. There wasn't much activity, but the horrible noises continued, growing louder as I approached. I would have to go through some residential and shopping areas to get to the heart of town, and that thought scared me. I didn't have a weapon, and I didn't even know what kind I would need. Obviously, you're reading this, so I'm currently safe for the most part, but at the time, my mind was moving from one awful scenario to the next. I never mentioned details of my fight with Lynn, and I don't intend to, with the exception that she fought with a strength that I didn't know she had. I was terrified to encounter that, not only for the potential of an altercation, but it would also alert people to my presence. Moving softly, I crept the edge of a flatbed. I looked up and the enormity of the device struck me. It was tall and alien. I skirted around the right side of it and saw the retreating back of a guard moving away to my left. I took off running and stopped under the awning of a small hardware shop. Passing through the haze and hum, I realized that I felt nothing. No resistance or pushback. Even stranger was the fact that once I had passed through, the humming in my chest had stopped. I kept close to the wall and I rounded the corner. I was going to have to cross the Colorado and head way west to get to my house. It would take a while, but the shadows would help. The sounds continued in the background, but as I moved through the streets, I heard something else. A low, muffled moaning slid down the empty streets. I heard it coming from two different ends of the road that I was on. I tried to ignore it, but I heard it again as I advanced. On the corner of 7th and Grand, I saw it. A cube made of what looked like plexiglass, 10 feet by 10 feet. Emanating from what appeared to be the plexiglass itself was a light blue hue. Inside were about 15 people crammed in together. Their clothes were dirty and their skin had a yellowish blue hue to it. Their eyes were sunken and afraid. Some looked angry but worn out. Others' eyes were just closed. Heads leaning against the glass, almost dead. The moaning was coming from those inside. I recognized a face, Marshall Levy, an old high school classmate. We had gone on a date once, but there was a dramatic episode involving spilled soda on my pants and a serious lack of chemistry. It ensured it was our only date. He looked terrible, but his face seemed different. There was something in the way that his lip was pulled up into a leer. There was dried spit and mucus around his mouth, caked and cracked. His eyes found mine, but there was no recognition there. I realized I was just a few feet from the glass now. Looking down at the road behind me, a loud thud made me jump. Marshall had pushed others aside and slammed himself against the wall. He was yelling inarticulately, scratching at the glass. My heart instantly began pounding and I stood frozen watching him in this frenzy. Voices, human voices, echoed in the distance and I heard footsteps. Sparing a glance for Marshall, I ran across the street to the footbridge and I sprinted away quickly. When I reached the end, I had slowed to an out-of-breath walk. I had to follow Highway 6 until I hit the outer edge of town to find my house, but I needed a break. From my position slightly above the main road, I could now see the dull glow of blue spotted sporadically along the east, west, and south side of town. There were dozens of them. The people in those cubes, they were residents. All of them were residents. All of them looked gaunt and exhausted. Were they all supplanted? I couldn't even fathom a situation where literally nobody had escaped. But then I remembered Eldridge and the small but firm shake of his head when I asked if others had gotten away. No. If that was the case, then it would mean that the EDD was rounding up these people, many of whom had probably been supplanted, but others who may just be terrified and in hiding. It was sick, but Eldridge hadn't given any indication that a method was known to unsupplant someone. Assuming the intruding manifestation could be pushed out, would the body die? Or all of these people simply lost causes? It was cruel and cold. And then a sudden thought struck me. My mom. Was her body dying in a cube somewhere? My father trapped inside? I connected with the main road and followed it to the street that crawled along the foothills of the mountains. Along the way, I saw more personnel in black, but also other individuals in gray and red uniforms, carrying firearms, their eyes glowing. At the time, I didn't know what to make of that, so I ignored them. I followed the road slowly, and it took me until 4:30 to get to my house. Cubes studded the road as I went. The faces that I saw were dead-looking in appearance, but filled with raw emotion. Some showed nothing at all. I wondered if some of the bodies simply died after being supplanted, or if suicides were simply thrown in with the rest while the situation was taken under control. My house was as I left it, except that front door was wide open. The garage stood open and empty, the blackness within uninviting. I heard scuffling feet in the distance and I inched closer to the house. Despite the effort of getting here, I was afraid to approach my home now. It was that feeling of visiting a place where memories seem to be held for you for safekeeping. The smells and look of things once familiar pulling you back with irresistible force. Sometimes those are good experiences, reliving those memories. But in that moment, I was afraid of what it would do to me. The scuffling got louder and I looked over my shoulder down the street. There seemed to be movements in the shadow, but I wasn't sure. My eyes were swimming with tears. I steeled myself and marched through the front door and directly into the living room. It was dark and cool. The undeniable fragrance of home invaded my nostrils and I felt myself relax. It was still creepy, but it was familiar. Lynn was gone. She must have run through the front door and left it open. I looked at the mug of tea that I had been nursing that night, spilled on its side on the floor. Going through the kitchen, the kettle sat cold and silent on a burner on the stove. My mom's charging cord dangling against the cabinet. Standing there with my hand resting on the counter, I heard a gravelly intake of breath somewhere in the house. I froze and felt icy fear ripple down my arms and into my stomach. I quietly crept to a drawer in the kitchen and took out the large mag light that my dad bought years ago. Testing that it still worked, I snapped it off again and moved into the back of the house. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I walked, listening to these small noises coming from my mom's bedroom. All thoughts of collecting small things that I had made a note to retrieve from my room and the rest of the house were lost. I rounded the corner of my parents' bedroom and I looked in. On the bed was a figure back facing me. I saw the chest expand and shrink, the small wheezing cut through the air. My hands were sweaty and shaking. I lifted the flashlight and I turned it on. The circle of light was dazzling in the darkness, reflecting off the second porch door that was connected to the room. The figure in navy capris and a red and white striped top froze. Mom? It was what she had been wearing that night. I inched closer, and the figure remained frozen. Mom, I asked again, my voice cracking. In the light, she slowly turned her head to look over her shoulder at me. I gasped and almost dropped the light as I saw her hollowed-out face and watery red-rimmed eyes. A dry breath and then, Mel? It was the same voice that I heard that night. This realization helped me move more confidently over to the figure. Stepping to the other side of the bed, I saw clutched in her hands an old family photo of the three of us that my mom had framed. Daddy? My eyes were dry, but emotion was in my voice. Mel, oh Mel. A hand reached weakly out to mine. It was my mom's voice, but my dad was evident inside of it. I knew that it was him. Have you been here this whole time? I wanted to sit on the bed next to him, but I couldn't. Not just yet. This is no way to be, bub. No way at all. Your mother. I could see a small tear leak from his right eye. We're both gone now. Only somehow I'm here. I'm so confused, so scared. His hand gripped the photograph more tightly. "But it sure is good to see you again, kiddo." He smiled a dry smile, and I sat in the bed next to him. The suddenness of my father's passing 6 years ago was completely upending. For months, my mom and I struggled to get through our daily lives. We managed well enough financially, but the small life that we were building lost one of its 3 primary pillars of support. I've since made peace with it, but still I've had dreams about him coming to see me, asking about my life. In those dreams, he was always proud of me, and I would wake up missing him so much that I almost couldn't catch my breath. I would wish to see him again, to really talk to him. But looking at this pitiful figure, the true shadow of the man that I knew, feeling the hard loss of my mother, I couldn't help but take that wish back. "Dad, oh God, is it really you?" "Yes, I don't know how this happened. Everything is so sharp and hard-edged now. The sounds are so loud and the lights are so bright. I'm confused," he repeated quietly to himself. "Something happened and then I felt some magnetic pull." He took a deep and rattling breath. "And then I was here in this house, your mother. And then I found this picture after you had gone. Look how little you were." His fingers touched the glass of the frame. "So little." Suddenly, a shout cut through the air. The harsh sounds of footsteps broke through the house, and I heard enraged screaming. The first one through the bedroom door had cuts all over, with bloodied fingertips and cracked lips. He had a manic grin on his face. One other man and 2 women charged into the room and stopped. Their breathing was heavy and somehow empty. They saw my mother lying on the bed, and they saw me sitting there. There was a moment's hesitation as something computed behind their eyes, and then the sliding glass door behind me exploded. Gunfire lit up the room, and a bullet caught the first man in the left cheek. His head pulsed open and he fell. A man and a woman with glowing eyes advanced through the shattered door those devices held in front of them. They hummed violently, and I saw an adult-height haze shield projected from the front of it. The weapon almost looked like a mini containment tower with a smaller golf ball-sized sphere on the end. My hair stood on end as they passed me. The remaining 3 supplanted, I could only assume that's what they were now, tried to run, but they were met by 3 other personnel in black, forcing them towards the first 2, devices held aloft. The man with the gun seemed even more hostile, with fiery blue-green eyes. He stomped in behind them and grabbed my father's arm forcefully and shoved him towards the 3-cornered supplanted on the other side of the bed. The picture fell from his fingers and hit the edge of the nightstand, cracking it. I watched my dad get up slowly from the floor. "Jesus Christ, Miss Callis!" Eldridge came in from the hallway, eyes glowing. "That's my father!" I moved towards the gunslinger. Eldridge caught me by the arm. "We had been tracking this last band of supplanted for 2 nights. They seem to have somehow figured out how to work together and hide from our sentries. We think that they're the ones who killed Preston and Matheson." This came from one of the women holding a device. Eldridge's eyes swept over the room. He looked at each of their captives in turn, examining them. "A 3rd team is outside waiting to help move them out to a block. This is the last of the residents. Move." They started forward, and carefully keeping the 4 individuals inside the field of their device's resistance, walked them outside. I stepped up quickly to stop them, but Eldridge pulled me back and zip-tied my hands in front of me. "How could you? All of these people." "They're no longer a threat. They are not who they once were. Let's go." I started to speak, but he shot me a look, a knowing look, and I fell silent. We were taken by truck back to the center of town. We passed the group that included my dad as we went. I saw them being ushered into an already full block. My dad looked tired and frail as he was pushed in. I looked at my shoes and took deep breaths, trying to contain the rage and conflicting emotions. As we approached, I saw what looked like a fleet of big rigs lined up diagonally on the main road, their back doors open. I saw blocks being loaded into their dark and cavernous bellies, 3 to a trailer. The people inside displayed a mix of reactions. I felt sick to my stomach. The writing on the big rig said, Axiom X. The name sounded familiar, some kind of company, but it escaped me. We were led to a grouping of trailers stationed in the mall parking lot. I was ushered inside one of them by Eldridge and a firearm-carrying guard. The guard waited outside, and Eldridge shut the door behind the two of us. He produced a pocket knife and cut the zip tie roughly from my wrist. I saw, sitting on the seats of the trailer's kitchen table, my backpack and the remains of my tent. My laptop sat closed on the table. Eldridge looked at me. He looked tired, and the bags under his eyes were pronounced. You'll be taken into custody and moved to a secure facility. You'll be given limited access to your cell phone and other devices to maintain the illusion of regularity in your daily life to your friends and relatives. Your computer is yet to be confiscated and replaced with an Axiom X-approved device. I suggest that you use this time wisely. That knowing look again. Why are you doing this? I don't know what this was in particular, the rounding up of citizens, the leniency towards me. He was about to speak, but a squawked voice came through his radio.
Block loading at 75%, Eldridge. We need you down on 8th and Grand.
He looked at me. Right. And he laughed. I'm sitting here exhausted and we're supposedly leaving soon. These are my experiences so far. I don't know when I'll be able to update you again, if I'll have access. I don't even know if they want me alive. This all feels so complex and steeped in years of hidden history. It feels insurmountable. But you are reading my voice and I will keep it strong and loud for as long as I can. I can't be the only one to bear witness. I hope to update you all soon. Entry: August 21st, Sunday, 2016 to August 24th, Wednesday, 2016. M. Callis. I'm not sure what to make of the past couple of days. Our journey took a day and I wasn't allowed outside throughout the trip, so I never really got my bearings. When we reached our destination, I finally understood where we were. The desert, dry air, and oppressive heat. It had to be Arizona, the closest site to the one in Colorado. As I was led outside with Eldridge by guards in gray and red, I saw the large semis being unloaded across the tarmac in the distance. The facility the blocks were being moved into was enormous but bland. It looked like those buildings you see every other semi docked where they drop off and receive cargo. I saw noticeably less movement in the blocks as they were transported inside. The compound the facility was on was enormous. The walk to where they held me was somewhat long, so I tried to take in as much as I could. To the west were 2 large buildings that appeared to be built for holding cargo. This included the ones where the blocks were being stored. To the east was an industrial park. Parking lots, 3-story buildings, and medians with cacti and red stone. It looked remarkably ordinary. Cars littered the lots. I saw the logo for Axiom X on the walls of these buildings. To the north was desert, bleak and empty. The south was the same except for the black vein of road cutting through it. The whole compound was fenced in. The poles on the fence were thicker than your average fence pole, and they were topped with brass globes. I was taken to a large, flat, 1-story building. Air conditioners chugged quietly in a line along one wall. Once inside, I realized that these were living quarters. The guards stopped inside the doors and I saw sweat beading on their foreheads. I had to go through a security checkpoint where my phone and computer were taken. Eldridge beckoned me to follow him down a series of hallways and showed me to room 250. It wasn't anything impressive. A single bed, a desk, sparse bathroom, and a dresser. No TV, but there was a stiff and scratchy armchair in the corner if I had the urge to sit back and read for a while. Could you explain to me what's going on? I dropped my bags and sat on the bed. I felt sticky with a sheen of sweat covering my skin. I hadn't changed my clothes since Friday. Eldridge made sure the door was closed and turned to me. You technically broke into a government quarantine and interacted closely with individuals inside that quarantine. This, he gestured to the room, is more than others would have gotten. I tried to contain my scoff. Is this because I made it out that night untouched? Is that what this is? Because if it is, you know why. My dad warned me in time somehow. There is nothing special about me other than that I was lucky enough to get to a car in time. Well, I realize that, but there are others that see potential in you. He paused for a minute. Back in the early 90s, there was a lack of congressional funding to the EDD, which resulted in a substantial amount of contractual work with Axiom. The technological advances that Axiom made were leaps and bounds beyond what government scientists were producing. The committees involved in the EDD were happy to hear this. Over time, more control was given to the company, and by 1999, all 5 facilities were running with Axiom-created equipment and staffed largely by Axiom scientists and staff. Congress and the governmental side of the EDD still have a hand in things, but Axiom-backed congressmen and women have slowly begun to become more prominent on those committees. The operation of the EDD has slowly come more into the control of Axiom. The government is still extremely tight-lipped about everything, but I haven't heard of anybody's hackles rising because of this shift in the power dynamic. He stopped to rub his eyes. Maybe it was decided by the powers that be that this is too much of a liability for the government to handle, or that it's not worth the time and money any longer. What I'm trying to tell you is that you're of great interest to Axiom now, regardless of what I report to them or the government. What happens next is largely out of my hands now. I felt hot, waxy fear drip down my back. I couldn't stop it from happening. A wash of self-pity came over me. I wondered how this had all happened. I had lost so much in such a short amount of time. It would be hard to describe, but I imagine it's similar to what people might feel when a natural disaster strikes. You lose your home, sometimes your family, your pets, your assets, everything. You're left with what you have on your back. Life experiences and intelligence may count for something, but the sheer emptiness of the loss of your physical life is beyond my ability to describe. Sitting in that dingy motel-like room drove it all home clearly to me. I had no home, and I felt as if I wasn't even regarded as a person any longer, but more of a pawn in the overall scheme of things. As if I had some special abilities or some special immunity that they could tease out of me. I know the trope of the sinister corporation is tired, although not unwarranted in many cases. But what Eldridge described to me about the shift in control over the EDD really upset me. So I'm to sit here and wait on them until they're ready with whatever they have to test me or something. I didn't choose for any of this. I was lucky enough that my father somehow came to me. Now here I am days later waiting on the whims of people who know nothing about me except the truths that I've told. Yet they don't even want to believe what I've said. I can't stay here. You can't leave. He stood up straight. You can't leave the compound, they won't let you. Even if you did leave, the fence that I saw you eyeing means protection. Being outside of it is dangerous. His phone buzzed. I have to go, he said suddenly. You'll be issued a laptop soon. I think you'll find a notebook and a pen in your bag though. Don't stop recording and don't stop writing. He pulled a small bag from his back pocket. It was black nylon and pill-shaped, roughly the size of his palm. Eldridge placed it on the bureau. Your access card is in the outside pouch. 2 of the scientists, Parson and Cambry, have asked that you report to Facility 1 at 9:30 tomorrow morning. I advise you make it a priority to get there. He unzipped the pouch and produced a contact lens case. Before you go, put these in your eyes. Axiom developed them. They allow you to see the manifestations. They react with the heat in your eyes and bend the light to such an extent that you can see where manifestations are at any given time. Don't keep them in for too long though. 2 hours max is pushing it. For what it's worth, I'm sorry that you're here. I never expected this turn of events, though maybe I did on some level. I could have kept you out of Glenwood when we saw you approaching. This story's just too important. Then why not do it yourself? You're using me to get this out into the open. I have trouble swallowing your supposed altruism when I'm the one living this and telling others about it. Eldridge's face grew red at that. I have to live with myself and my past. Bigger things are in motion, and at this point, my credibility is comprised by my association with all of this. Your voice is pure and untouched. So yes, I am using it. I'm not asking you to overlook that. Be disgusted with me, I would welcome it. I'd be shocked if you weren't. Once you get in there, he pointed over in the direction of the facility buildings. You'll see the extent of things. He turned and left abruptly. I didn't look at the contracts or the access card. I laid on the bed and I looked at the ceiling. My body and my mind were tired. I wanted to shower, but I felt too exhausted to move, and after a few minutes, I fell asleep. In my dream, I was laying in the bed just as I was when I had drifted off to sleep. The lights were off and the silence was so complete that my ears felt like they were ringing. There was a weight on the bed other than my own. To my right, facing the wall, was a dark figure with its back towards me. It was still, but in the same position my dad was when I found him in the bedroom in Glenwood. I didn't move and I barely breathed. The figure started to slowly roll towards the tight space in between the bed and the wall. I knew that a full rotation would reveal its face, and although I wanted to shut my eyes, I couldn't. It fell suddenly into that tight space, and I didn't see its face. My dream self had no reaction, and then I saw two long-fingered hands, smoky and black, grip the edge of the bed and begin to pull it towards the ground. My side of the bed tilted up as the hands pulled down. A head began to rise above the edge of the comforter. It was shorter than a human head in charcoal gray. It had only a mouth that was open and possibly wide. My body began to give into gravity and slide down the bed. Suddenly, the bed was the size of a parking lot, and I was the size of an ant. The open mouth was huge, an empty, gaping maw. I fell towards that mouth, and as my body rolled over the hot and steaming gums, I jerked violently in my sleep. I woke up suddenly and in a panic. Crawling off the bed frantically, I backed up against the window. It was dark out except for the lights illuminating the outside parking lots. I breathed heavily as I stared at the space between the bed and the wall. Eventually, I got the nerve to check that space, and there was nothing there. I left the lights on the whole night while I wrote. I slept only a few hours after that dream and was woken up by a knock at the door around 8:30 a.m. on Tuesday. When I opened it, I found a laptop bag with a computer inside of it sitting there. I didn't use it until I ended up in Albuquerque, where I am right now. I got ready for my meeting or appointment or whatever you want to call it, and I felt a bit better having showered and washed my hair. The contacts sat waiting for me. I'm lucky enough to have almost 20/20 vision, so I didn't have to swap any prescription lenses for these. They were thick and awkward when I put them in, and I had to blink away the tears as I adjusted to the new sensation. When I opened my eyes, things looked how they normally did, just a bit sharper. Have you ever worn polarized lenses? There's something about them that sort of mutes the brightness of the world, while sharpening the edges and colors of what you see. These lenses did that. I wasn't surprised to see then that the Arizona sun didn't bother my eyes as much as it normally would have when I left the residential building. I glanced around the compound as I walked and found myself looking into the expanse of the desert. I thought that I saw gray and white blurs in the distance, but they were too far to make out. The haze of heat rising from the desert earth obstructed any chance I had of seeing into the distance with clarity. I quickly forgot about what I thought that I saw once I got to Facility 1. I provided my access card to the front security desk. It was scanned and a security member came to me, eyes literally glowing. We made small talk and she was friendly, but I had a sense that she was working off of a loose script. We whispered through hallways where I saw laboratory spaces, offices, social areas, and storage rooms. The air was chilled and I felt goosebumps on my arms. The route through the building was winding, and it felt as though she was told to take the long way around to get to Parsons and Cambry. We entered a side set of stairs and climbed past the second floor and exited on the third. Pushing through a door at the end of the hallway, we walked out onto a dangling metal bridge. The catwalk crossed over what was probably one of the largest and most vast sections of the building. Hanging from the ceiling were large, flat bronze discs, and stretched along the walls were more containment pillars. I took this all in a matter of seconds, but before I even looked down, the sound was what hit me first. There were hundreds of people down on the floor. Almost all were yelling, some weakly, some loudly. Some were crying or arguing through sobs. These interactions were sometimes occurring with a partner and sometimes alone. It was a symphony of the dead. Bunks were scattered around in what I could tell were once orderly rows, and I could see temporary toilets against the walls and intervals between privacy curtains. Everything was in disarray. Everyone looked emaciated and sick. Their clothes were dirty and tattered. Many were simply sprawled out. On the floor or the beds, it didn't seem to matter. But with my new eyes, I saw more. I saw gray-white figures, hazy, as if seen through the snow on a washed-out TV screen. Some were tall and others were squat and fat, and some figures had the proportions of a normal adult human, only with a slightly larger mouth or 2 long legs. I can see that these figures were lingering around the body to which they were attached. It was as if these people had died and yet their ghosts were still tethered to their physical bodies. Only I knew that that wasn't what had happened. The shadows were making grotesque faces, contorted in grimaces of pain or sorrow, anger and hate, of fear. I saw their mouths moving, talking quickly, but I heard no sound come from their transparent throats. Some had their mouths open in what looked like a terrified scream. The figures were all distorted in some macabre manner, and all of them looked to be in some type of pain. Somewhere in the rational part of my brain, I wondered if they had always looked like this or if they had been twisted over time. The people to whom they were attached appeared to mimic the shadows, somehow translating and vocalizing those emotions in one form or another. Worse still were those who had no shadow hovering over their bodies. They were just people, Glenwood residents swept up with the rest of the supplanted. Solitary children, a few men and some women, all by themselves and isolated from one another. My security escort didn't notice that I had stopped some 10 feet back when she had turned. "Are these?" I couldn't get the words out. My eyes searched frantically among the bodies for my father. She didn't answer and instead asked me to follow her. When we got to Dr. Parsons' empty office space, I realized that I had no recollection of the rest of our short journey beyond that catwalk. My mind was racing. Dr. Parsons and Dr. Cambry both looked like normal people. They could have been the parents of friends of mine. They wore lanyards around their necks with access cards attached and contacts in their eyes. I sat down. They introduced themselves and offered me something to drink. I declined. Then they began to run through a history of the EDD. You know most of it, I do too, it's not worth repeating. Dr. Cambry shifted subjects. "You must be wondering about what you saw the other night, and probably about what you saw before coming here to this office." My hands were shaking with anger and fright. I looked at him to answer, but before I could respond, Dr. Parsons cut me off. "Axiom has begun experimentation and testing on the supplantation process, more accurately on how to deliberately supplant somebody and how to then, forgive the term, exercise that manifestation, returning the individual to their original state." They explained further that tests over the past 2 years were unsuccessful. Those individuals were lost causes. Who knows what was done with them? The events in Glenwood were indeed unfortunate, they said, but not without their silver lining. We were lucky enough to save these individuals, the ones you saw a little bit earlier. We brought them here, and what we hope to achieve is to reverse the supplanation process. I finally got to speak. And you're doing this to rescue those lost during the events, to bring them back. It was hard to keep the disbelief from my voice. Well, yes, Dr. Cambry replied. But as part of our ongoing research endeavors, if we can reverse this process, then we're one step closer to actively supplanting someone safely with a manifestation of our choosing and then remove them with no harm done to the host. Host? I sat back and felt the loose threads of what they were getting back, trying to connect. You want to actively supplant a person and then push that shadow back out and replace it with the original person. Am I getting that right? Yes. Cambry began to speak, but I cut her off. To what end? I mean, you've seen what happens. The types of manifestations that come back. The type of people they become. Cambry sat silently for a minute. Parsons looked at her. In your statement, you mentioned that your father came to you, she said slowly and carefully. Further, you came into contact with him again later the next day. I hope that I'm not being insensitive, but what was that experience like for you? I opened and closed my mouth. The threads were alive with electricity, but I answered. It was painful and sad. I've missed him. Of course I have, but it all felt wrong. It was him, but not him. They seemed to ignore that sentiment. Well, that is the end we hope to achieve, Miss Callis, Parsons said. Imagine being able to speak with your loved ones from years past. What you would say, what they would say. His eyes glittered. You, Miss Callis, are the control of this experiment. Those individuals you saw, the ones from Glenwood, they provide the best chance we have at unraveling this mystery. You will act as a counterbalance of sorts throughout the process. The threads connected with a jolt. I couldn't believe the errant and utter disregard for those people, no more than I could believe how I was to be the control in their experiment. We are on the edge of a scientific breakthrough so monumental that it defies full comprehension. The implications alone are staggering. We are close, Miss Callis, so very close. Please, come with us. I stayed sitting. The security came from the hallway outside and pulled me up by my arm. Cambry and Parsons had apparently lost patience with my half-hearted defiance to their work. I shook my arm roughly from her grip. Despite what you may think or have been told, Cambry said, looking into my face, you are not a visitor here. We are scheduled to perform a test in 15 minutes. You will come and watch. The false niceties of the first half of our meeting, such as they were over. They told me my place in this and I was supposed to respect it. That was why they were so candid with me. Probably they never expected me to leave. What's the harm in sharing the details of their work? I had no fight in me though, but more than that, I knew that I had no plan of escape. I would have to wait. We walked through a series of corridors to an elevator where we rode down to SB2, sub-basement 2 maybe. The doors opened to a room with a cavernous ceiling. It was enormous and circular in shape. On the far side was the real-life version of the hastily drawn sketch that Eldridge had given me. The pillars stood tall, firm, and imposing, and one of those bronze discs hung over them, covering the full circumference of the circle that the pillars formed. On the floor were 5 smooth pie-slice-shaped stones making a circle. Set into each was a smooth crystal about 20 inches across. Sitting in the center was a man in a ruffled suit, looking tired and haggard. His eyes were wild, looking at the apparatus around him and the individuals outside of it. My contacts showed me the shadow of an old woman hunched over the man's body. She was spinning on the spot, taking in her surroundings. She looked afraid and was crying silent tears. I knew that Parsons and Cambry could see her too. We all could. Walking to a control panel set up on a platform some 40 feet away from the pillars, Cambry said, we have tests scheduled every hour and a half across all of our facilities. Of course, they are all working on separate pieces of this research, although none are as interesting as ours. She smiled at me. I stood on the platform as lights were dimmed and the pillars were powered up. Other control stations were set up around the room and operators with headsets were confirming the sequence of activation to one another. I watched as the humming became stronger and the light on each control station turned green, which presumably gave others the go-ahead to begin their part of the sequence. When all stations were green, the operators of the one that I was on punched buttons and pulled levers. The humming was impressive. Between the pillars, the heat haze that I saw in Glenwood rose up, only this time I saw starlight dance along the haze. The smell of ozone permeated the air and I watched as the operators worked. Dozens of pairs of glowing eyes were watching the spectacle between the pillars. The hum was audible and I pressed in on my eardrums. Inside the circle, I saw the 5 smooth crystals begin to glow. The man in the center cried out. The old woman began sobbing. The haze was so thick now it looked as though they were underwater. She tried to clutch at the man, but her hands found no purchase. She was on all fours, breathing heavily, but I saw him trembling. He looked up at the platform and I saw blood coming from his nostrils and his left ear. His eyes were red and the veins in his neck stood out. The old woman began to dissolve. I could see the frantic look on her face as she began to fade. The man rose up on his knees, arms wrapped around his stomach. He looked as though that he was going to be sick. And then suddenly the right side of his chest crushed in with a sickening squelch. The top left side of his head collapsed into his skull after that. He coughed one smattering of blood onto the stone and fell forward. The old woman's mouth was open and she suddenly and violently dissolved, as if blown apart by a sudden forceful wind. The humming began to lessen and slow. For an instant as I watched, I saw a large shadow pass over the sparkling haze of the containment field, a shadow as tall as the pillars themselves. It lingered for the span of 3 seconds and then it was gone. I don't know if the others saw it, but I assume that they must have. My dream suddenly came back to me in that moment, but like the first failed flick of a Bic lighter, the spark of that memory was gone in an instant. Parsons sighed disgustedly and pulled a contact case from his back pocket. He removed the contacts from his eyes and blinked moisture back into them. Another one, maybe the tension of the field was applied too quickly. Cambry looked at him. Perhaps. She was silent and turned from him, her eyes on the red splattered in the circle. I was led away after that. No further explanation. Cambry and Parsons didn't appear to notice that I had left. I went back to my room and I took out my contacts. Numbly, I wrote down what I could. I'm done transcribing this for now. The events of the rest of that day were uneventful and aren't worth telling. I'm away from that facility. What happened there appears to be happening elsewhere. If that's the case and I'm right, then this has gone far beyond my own experience. If you dream like I dreamed, then you've had your warning. There is no emergency alert system for this other than that dream. Get out and don't look back.